everybody. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lewis? Here. Mayor DeGolia?
Here. Okay. The next item on the agenda is presentations. And shall we start with the Peninsula Humane Society? You got here just in time. You can go second if you want.
No, I'm fine, but do you have me loaded up? Teresa?
You're ready.
I think you're loaded.
It was a horrible accident on 101. I apologize. I
No
normally
problem.
try to be here much earlier than this, but
Yes, glad you weren't in
We're
it.
flexible.
me too. Yes, it's one of those moments. So forward backwards there. I think I got that. Thank you. Well, thank you for your patience and good to meet with you all. My name is Ken White. I'm president of the Peninsula Humane Society and SPCA, and your city manager, George, has been one of those city folks representing the cities in negotiations with the Humane Society for renewal of the contract. George has invited me to come down and speak with you, visit with you about the Peninsula Humane Society and our Animal Control Services relationship. And I'd like to walk us through a PowerPoint presentation on that. So to the first point, what is the Peninsula Humane Society? We are a private, nonprofit, public benefit animal welfare organization, which is made up of 125 employees and approximately 1,400 volunteers. And by the way, 89 of those volunteers are residents of the city of Atherton, including 2 members of our volunteer board of directors. We're supported by 24,000 families. That includes 204 Atherton families, as well as Menlo School and Atherton's Brownie Troop 62345. And we save the lives of approximately 6,000 animals each and every year. Our annual operating budget for the current fiscal year is $12.7 million. And of that, approximately 44%, or $5.7 million, is earned through the work we perform under the Animal Control Service Agreement with the county and with the cities. It's important to note that animal control is not an option. The state requires that the counties and cities provide animal control services, which is a series of laws and mandates which make up about a 1,720-page book. You are able to provide that either through your own municipal program or by law under contract with a nonprofit animal welfare organization. And San Mateo County is one of only 3 counties left in the state that has a comprehensive animal control program with a private nonprofit such as ours. We believe that it's in the best interest of the animals, of the citizens who care about the animals, and of local government itself for that contract to remain in place. And the truth is, we want to be your animal control provider. We're very committed to that. We've been that for the 60-plus years we've been in existence. However, we are not willing to be the pound. And since we subsidize the work that we do for the county and the cities through charitable donations, this saves the county and the cities considerable monies. So how cost-effective is the relationship the county and the cities have with Peninsula Humane? Every several years, a survey is conducted of a few of the major Bay Area counties looking at the cost of animal control services per resident. That's the unit of measure that we all agree to. So the question is comparing San Mateo with all the other counties, cities, or the counties in the Bay Area, what is the cost per resident? The last time the survey was conducted was in the spring of 2012. And as the chart shows, in Marin, it was almost $12.80 per resident. In Contra Costa, $10.14 of government money was paid per resident for animal control. In Santa Clara County, it was $8.64. Here in San Mateo, $7.36. And San Francisco, a frankly grossly underfunded program at $5.85 per resident. The average cost in the Bay Area of those 5 counties per resident was $9.32. San Mateo, the cost was $7.36, roughly $2 less per resident than the average. That survey, by the way, has been distributed to local government. Additional copies certainly are available to you. It quotes all the sources, so anyone can double check the information that's there. Alameda County is excluded on that survey because, at least at the current moment, it's a disaster. There are some 15 or 16 different agencies, all on a patchwork quilt. It's almost impossible to get numbers. Napa and Sonoma are excluded because they are largely rural services and there's no apples to apples comparison to be made there. Why are our costs so low here in San Mateo County compared to the other Bay Area counties? There are several reasons. Throughout the state, animal cruelty and neglect investigations, which are crimes defined in the Penal Code, is a function of animal control, and it is paid for throughout the state by government, except here in San Mateo County. San Mateo County, that work is funded entirely by contributions made to the Peninsula Humane Society by our donors, which means our donors paid for the 560 cruelty and neglect investigations performed here in San Mateo County last year. Another reason, throughout the state, the adoption of animals is a requirement of government under animal control and is paid for as such throughout the state by government everywhere except here in San Mateo County, where again, it is paid for by charitable donations made to the Humane Society by our donors. Which means our donors paid for the program costs, which adopted 3,304 animals out to new families last year. And since our new facility, which if you haven't visited, I invite you all to come to see, the Lantos Center for Compassion in Burlingame, since that new facility handles all of the adoptions throughout San Mateo County, the new shelter which the county and the cities are looking at building will not have to have that adoption wing, which is, having built 4 shelters in my career, is arguably the most expensive real estate you would put into a shelter. So animal control costs that you do not pay for in San Mateo County are cruelty investigations, the adoption program, and the adoption wing of a new shelter. And then add to that the simple fact that we're a nonprofit. Our staff are paid nonprofit rates. They don't have a retirement benefit program in general. Nonprofits are less expensive than government work, which is why government tends to like to contract with NGOs. What else do we do in this community which is not part of the Animal Control Services contract? Our HOPE program, which makes well and then finds home for approximately 200 sick and injured animals every month, is paid for by donations. The rehabilitation of injured and orphaned wildlife, about 1,500 animals a year, by donations. Our low-cost spay-neuter program is paid for by donations, and by the way, we were, excuse me, the first humane society in the country to have a public low-cost program, point of pride for us. Our new no-cost mobile spay-neuter program, which targets economically disadvantaged communities, paid for again by donations, as well as our human education program for school children, our summer camp programs, our animal-assisted therapy programs, Safe House, which is a program that takes in the pets of women and family who need to go into an abused spouse care center. One of those shelters will take care of the women, and the children will take care of the animals during that period of time. And also our pop-up disaster emergency response system. We have 4 trailers parked strategically around the county during a major disaster, anything from a house fire to an earthquake. They're deployed in contract with the Red Cross and working in tandem with the Office of Emergency Services in the county. When people go to the Red Cross shelter, their pets will come to our pop-up shelters. So that's all paid for by donations. What is part of animal control services? What is the mandated work that you do pay for? The housing and care of stray and abandoned dogs, the housing and care of stray and abandoned cats, the housing and care of stray or abandoned other pet animals such as goldfish and boa constrictors, the housing and care of stray or abandoned exotic animals, monkeys and cobras, different from native wildlife, that work paid for by donations, the housing and care of stray farmed animals, pig, goats, sheep, the occasional horse, the housing and care of dogs, cats, and other pets and farmed animals who are relinquished by owners unwilling or unable to care for them any longer, the housing and care of animals whose owners are caught up in a crisis, 5150, arrests, sudden hospitalization, evictions, fires, other disasters, some efforts to make well medically and behaviorally those animals who present with exigent medical issues, the spay-neuter services for animals prior to adoption as part of the contract, unlike the work we do for the public animals, which is paid for by donations. our lost and found pet services, the low-cost rabies prevention clinic, dog licensing, cat licensing in those communities where it's required, euthanasia of animals for whom there are no other better outcomes because of their health or behavior, rescuing animals in distress, assisting police, sheriff, and other first responders involved in a situation necessitating action, emergency veterinary services, transporting animals confined to strays in residents' homes, responding to reports of dog bites and attacks, including packs of animals, managing the county's dangerous and vicious animal program, assisting where animals are involved as traffic hazards, picking up and disposing of dead animals, quarantine of animals potentially exposed to rabies, enforcing local animal-related ordinances, performing euthanasia of injured wildlife in the field as part of the contract, as is participating in county-wide and city disaster preparedness events and training. And although at a far more basic level, really shifted at emergencies only, that work is provided 24/7, 365 days of the year. Specific to Atherton, in 2014, our field staff, our offices responded 186 times to calls within this city, roughly once every other day. That's a small portion, of course, of the 16,870 officer responses throughout the county. We included 44 Atherton residents' requests related to sick or injured animals, 33 home visits related to animals confined under rabies quarantine per the county's health department protocol and state law that comes after an animal has bitten a person, 36 stray animals in Atherton last year, 20 of them confined by residents, 16 running at large, and 13 rescues to save an animal in immediate distress, and 7 calls to your police or emergency medical techs or fire department personnel to assist. The rest of those calls were made up of such things as responding to reports of aggressive or attacking animals, removing dead animals from the streets, euthanasia in the field of injured wildlife, and investigation of violations of the city's municipal ordinance. In 2014, Peninsula Humane Society took in 120 animals from Atherton. That's up to 15,490 animals received throughout the county. That included 58 injured or orphaned native wildlife whose care is paid for by donations. The 62 others are dogs, cats, along with other pets such as rabbits, guinea pigs, pet lizards, and birds. And of those pet or companion animals, 49 were given up by owners, 13 of them were strays. Of the pets from Atherton, we were able to find homes for fully 100% of those animals who came to us healthy. That's a commitment we made to the residents throughout the county 12 years ago, one we've lived up to, 100% adoption of the animals who come to us healthy. And we were also able to make well fully 100% of those animals who came to us from Atherton who had medical or treatable behavioral issues. We have among the highest release rates of any humane society in the nation, making our communities about the safest place in the nation for pet animals. We've reduced euthanasia in San Mateo County by a total of 96+%, comparing statistics today to those in 1970. And if there's any further questions about the details of that work, it's on our website. Lots of transparency here. PHS by the numbers at phs-spca.org, which is my presentation to you. And I'd welcome any questions, comments, or concerns that I might be able to address.
Any questions?
I just have one.
Go ahead.
So the dead animals, you'll pick up any dead animal, like skunks or
The contract that
squirrels
the contract we have with the county, and then the county contracts with the cities, has about as complicated an algorithm as you could possibly imagine to answer that question. And what it basically amounts to is this. We'll pick up all animals on public thoroughfares, public streets, public rights of way, and we'll pick up dead companion animals, pets, not wildlife, in someone's personal property. But there's lots of exclusions. Frankly, if it were up to us, it would be all or nothing. But the county does not wish to have an all or nothing approach.
what about birds? that
all
you think
animals,
are
yes.
Diseased or
An animal's diseased, yes.
Yeah.
An animal that's dead on public property, if it's the person's pet, for example, no.
No.
If it's wildlife, no.
Right.
If it's a pet animal, yes.
Sure, thank you.
Yes, sir.
When you're picking up diseased and dead animals like birds, I know the mosquito vector control, who's making the next presentation, they like to inspect those animals. How do you coordinate with that organization to verify West Nile virus or other types of outbreaks that are contracted by squirrels and the crows, etc.?
It's a great question, and the simple reality is our contract with the county is managed through the health department, and so the health department determines the protocols which we then follow. So for example, we just had, sad to say, a dead bat found in a store in Burlingame. That animal came to PHS. It had been in contact with people in that store. The animal is sent to the health department for examination of the brain tissue. That animal has tested positive for rabies. So there now will be a series of questions asked and answered by the health department regarding who may have come in contact with that animal. Essentially, whatever agency for the county, the state, or federal government, depending on the disease of concern, contacts us, the animals are either sent to them. We perform the tests for those animals. We have 7 veterinarians on staff, or the head is decapitated, and that's what's sent off for examination. We basically follow the suggestion or recommendation of the subject matter expert at those agencies.
So if we call the vector control people to pick up, say, a dead crow in the middle of the summer, when they've asked us to report those, and they pick it up, they turn it over to you then?
I don't honestly know exactly the protocol on dead crows in the summer, but if the vector control has said, we want the blood, we get the blood tested. If they say they want the whole body, they get the whole body tested. We simply respond to what the health department and the other subject matter experts ask us to do. Sure.
Ken, you had mentioned you had 540 cruelty investigations last year. Can you give me an idea of what the cost of doing those investigations were?
Sure. Essentially, that was something that had been paid for under contract for any number of years. When the economy started to do the voodoo that it did so well a few years ago, the county asked us to basically cut services to a lower level. We were not willing to cut services to a lower level, again, because we are the Humane Society. We will not be a pound. So instead, we started looking at what services could we take over on our own. At that point, we took over, it was, I think, a 2 or 3 year transition, I do not remember, but we took over the funding of 2 FTEs, 2 full-time employees, and that was the cost of cruelty investigation. That's essentially about $140,000 per year. Today's dollars, I think it was 100 back then. You're welcome, sir. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and let me just say, I would invite you all, whether for a city council meeting or some other visit, to come tour the new facility. We are proud of what we've done. We're proud of being part of this community, and we sure welcome any of you come to see it. Thank you so much for your time.
Very thorough presentation.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye now. Thanks, George. Bye-bye.
Okay. The next presentation is Nation Persons.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor Lewis, and council members. 13 months ago, you appointed me to the position here, and I thought it would be important that I give you sort of an update, and as long as you have me in this position, I think every January I will come to you to tell you the results and the highlights of the mosquito vector control district for the following year. So January I talked to your city council, your city mayor, and so we decided this was a good time to give you a quick little presentation. Mine is not going to be as detailed as the Humane Society, but I'm certainly going to be open to questions. So let's go to the first slide. Well, okay, let's go through the first 8. I was going to go through to the end. Yeah, but just through those.
Very last slide.
Yeah, go all the way through. I'm going to go just to the high executive summary first.
Are you going out of order?
Yeah, we're going to go out and we'll go back a second. What's the next one? Next.
There's one after that. Sorry about that.
Okay, we don't have that, Teresa. We don't have the 2 pieces of paper that I.
Yes.
Yeah, we can read them. I'm not sure you can read those, and I don't. Unfortunately, can you blow it up?
Blow it up. See the percentage there, please. Down below that, 2 lines below that. See where it says percent.
Yeah, it's.
See where it says percent right here.
I'm just giving you an executive summary. The first of all was the district manager, Robert Gay. His contract was not renewed on August 31st, 2014. Okay. The board, it was public knowledge, the board voted 11-9 not to extend his contract for another year or two. Then the finance manager, Ricindo Rodriguez, who'd been there about 2 years, was appointed interim manager September 1st. He has the position right now, and he'll hold that until we appoint a new district manager, which is going to be very shortly. The board hired an executive search firm to recruit a new district manager. We've got the person identified. We're doing background checks, which we didn't do on some other people before. So we expect to name them to the public at about 15 days, and they'll start work March 1st. But they're very highly qualified, PhD, and they're going to fit in very well. I can't say anything. I'd like to say more, but I just don't want, because it's quiet and confidential right now. But you'll be fine. Number 4, and that's what we ran through here earlier. We hired a public outreach officer in October, Megan Caldwell, and the reason why we added her to the payroll is that it's more of an outreach person to get around to the cities, the residents, to explain what we're doing, how we fit in, go to schools, so that people have a general idea of what the Mosquito Vector Control District does. I mean, most people don't even know about it, but I will say last year in California, there were 31 deaths from West Nile virus. So none in San Mateo County, thank God. Well, I actually personally met a guy about 4 months ago that had it. It took him 6 months to get over it. It was very, very tough. I was shocked at how difficult this is. So anyway, that's sort of an executive summary of the major points. You can ask me questions. Next is sort of, I call vital statistics. We collected 4,000, approximately. I got this from our lab director yesterday. Approximately 4,496 in Atherton that were reflected in Atherton. The dead birds that we collected countywide, 441. We had 14 in Atherton. And the good news, none of these tested positive in Atherton. So we didn't have any mosquito problems here in our city. So that's good news. Let me just go to the next slide.
Well, while you're on that chart,
Yeah.
can I ask you a quick question? There was a big write-up on the yellow fever that was just in Menlo Park. I thought that there was a report that there was some found in West Atherton.
No, that's Adidas aegypti you're talking about. That's what it is. According to the lab director, we had a problem in West Menlo. I was going to get to that a little bit. Yeah, Holy Cross Cemetery. But no, we haven't had any problem in Atherton. I'm relying on my lab.
Can I, before you leave that, may I, through the chair? Doesn't 4,000 mosquitoes for the whole county seem like a low number? I don't know. For a mosquito, they come in droves sometimes.
These
It just seems
are
like a really
collected
low
and
number to me.
it's tested and collected. I'm going to go into how we pick up mosquitoes. Okay, I'm going to explain how.
In the little yellow things. The little yellow mosquito
Yeah,
tin.
but
No.
but I'm going to explain it. We don't go test every one of those. I mean, it depends on the situation. I'm going to go into that
Okay,
in a second.
I'm sorry.
So, and no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. So anyway, what really goes on here is that we have a surveillance program. So usually the public will call, report a dead bird, or it goes to the Peninsula Humane Society too. Anyway, so the public will call. Our technicians will go out. They will pick up the bird and they'll test it for West Nile virus. Okay. See if it's positive. Then we're going to set mosquito traps in that area, that specific area where the bird is. And if you read the newspapers, there's been a lot of problems in West Menlo. No problems in Atherton. The two problems with West Nile virus this year have been West Menlo Park and San Mateo. That's where we've done a lot of work. So the traps are set, and then we'll capture some of these mosquitoes, but it depends, on how big an area. And then if the mosquitoes are tested positive for West Nile virus, then we have to fog. And the fogging is done at nighttime, and this is where the public outreach lady we decided to hire one, because the problem is there was a lot of heat by residents in West Menlo saying, hey, we're getting fogged, we don't know what's going on, so we're trying to build a database of people's names so that we can let them know that we're gonna fog tonight at 9 o'clock for mosquitoes. So, but we only had 2 areas of outbreaks, really, this West Menlo and San Mateo. We didn't have any in Atherton. And I'm relying on the staff. I mean, I'm not out there, you know, collecting the mosquitoes, but that's what I'm told. Okay, so let's go down a little further. So we had extensive fogging, like I said, and then this is the Aedes aegypti is another surveillance program for mosquitoes. And I should say the mosquito program runs between April and October. Okay, that's when the mosquitoes, when it gets hot, and that's when they come out, and that's when we do the trappings. So on the Aedes aegypti, we set traps in cemeteries. That's for somehow they like to come around there. So that's why Holy Cross Cemetery in West Menlo, we set those traps. And if they're eradicated, there's really, you have to sort of go around within a 200-meter area of that and just try to eradicate and get rid of them. There's not a spray you can use or anything else. So, you know, it's probably a little more serious than the what's.
And Aedes aegypti is the carrier for
It's a
yellow
mosquito.
fever?
Yeah, it's a mosquito.
But the problem is that it carries yellow fever, is that
I
correct?
think it does, yeah. But we haven't had any major, there's been no, you know, this is not a panic on this, don't. The other period, and I didn't really want to go into this, but I want to just mention for a second from the peninsula, is between between November and March, the off season for mosquitoes, that's when we do vector control is more of a high focus on that, and that tends to be for hantavirus and for ticks. So those are the 2 things that we track down. You mentioned, he was talking about, I forget exactly, rodents and rats. So there's a county health environmental department, and there's the mosquito vector control district. They're 2 separate entities. They don't, you know, I think they work sort of semi-independently, to be honest, from what I've seen. So, but certainly they would hopefully contact us if they saw a tick problem or there was a rat that they would want to test for hantavirus. This is a secondary role for the mosquito control vector district. Okay. Financially, we're in great shape. $5 million plus in the bank in reserves, so there's no problem. Balance our budget. We have probably 6 to 8 new members on the board of 21 this last year. Some really great people. I'm very impressed with the new members. And that's sort of generally it on the executive summary, and I could run through this slide presentation for about 3 or 4 minutes that has the, it's what our Megan Caldwell, our outreach officers, put together. This is sort of the first draft. It's going to then go around to be used, you know, for outreach situations, for town councils, cities, whatever else. So she put this together. This gives you a little more broad-based background of what we do. And then if there are any questions, I'll take them now. If you have any questions.
Well, why don't you run through the
Let's
slides?
run it. Let's run through the slides. Thanks. Okay. So this shows we've been around a while. 100 years next year. It actually is about 15 years ago we consolidated the the whole county into one vector control mosquito district. There were 2, but now we have 1. Next slide, please. Okay. So we're a special district. We get our money through tax assessments. Every Atherton resident pays $3.74 toward mosquito control vector district. Services are provided free to residents of San Mateo County. One thing I didn't say was that I learned at the trustees day that a number of people have their swimming pools here in Atherton with water, and they may leave for a while. Mosquitoes start breeding, so we go in there and make sure that somehow neighbors would call and say, hey, the pool looks like it's been sitting there with mosquitoes. So we go in and take care of that, so we don't have any mosquito problems. Okay, next. Okay, inspections identify. Okay, standing water, like we said. Anyway, I think that's sort of self-explanatory. Okay.
So, like we talked about trapping for West Nile virus, that is the big banana here in San Mateo County. Okay, next. Okay, tick, as I mentioned, is a secondary for, obviously Lyme disease is a problem, but we only really we put out traps in just 2 areas, some parks that we do. Same thing with rodents, the Hunte virus. Again, there's only a couple places we do it. San Bruno Mountain's one of them, and San Pedro Park. Next. Okay, you got me there. I didn't know we do yellow jacket control, but I guess we do some of that. Okay. This is what we're doing now, outreach. Okay. So our offices, you probably know. Is that it? So anyway, if you have any questions.
Any questions? I do.
Okay.
First, the gentleman, the manager that you guys did not renew the contract, is that the gentleman that also hired the 2 people that had the problems a couple
With the
years back?
financial, yes.
Okay. And the second thing I want to say is, I do want to say I've used the program, and I think it's a great program, and I think I've said it to George and others that we got to let people know in Atherton that we have this program and connect into it. But I am actually probably the one closest to the western section of Atherton, and I will say that the crews that did come out for Yellow Jackets, which I think my house is a party house for Yellow Jackets, but that being said, the removal, they also went around to all my neighbors and they knew which construction sites and which properties that in fact were vacant and potential pools and actually inspect probably a half-mile radius around my house.
Okay.
So I was very pleased that that was the type of service, and they came back and informed me, by the way, we've noticed it. So as a client, I'd like to say, good job on the staffing and very responsive. So
Yeah, no, I think we have. I met all the staff at the truck. There's a guy named David Allen that works at Atherton, and I'm pretty impressed. These guys are well motivated and do a great job. I will pass that on. But if you want any, I call outreach or public discussions of this, the city council, I can bring Megan back for a further discussion, or you want it in your schools, or I don't know, whatever you want. Just let me know. I'll leave a few cards with George,
beautiful.
and then he can pass them out or whatever he needs to do.
Vice Mayor Lewis?
Thank you.
So
Yes.
I have a question,
Yes,
a couple
Vice Mayor.
questions. You talked about pools in Atherton. Do you have any idea how many pools you actually treated?
70.
70 last year in 2014. There were 70 pools that were like abandoned. and
Well,
filling
it
up
could
with
be abandoned, but it could be like
mosquitoes or
a
something.
vacant house that's gonna get torn down, the residents left for 6 months because they don't live here. It was a variety of things that he mentioned to me. That's really David Allen, our Atherton technician, said he spends time on that.
Okay. The other thing about, you mentioned like for the fogging in the Menlo Park area that you were getting flack from the residents because they weren't being notified. Can't you get help from the city of Menlo Park to notify these residents? I mean, they have emails and techniques to allow to notify residents of special meetings of in a certain area, a geographic area. I would think that rather than trying to recreate the wheel a little bit there, you could just
Vice Mayor Lewis, I think that's a great point. I will pass that back to the staff at the mosquito district, because I think, there just seems, they said that the residents of Menlo Park were not informed as to all of a sudden the fogging's going at 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night. They come by and people know what the heck's going on.
I think a simple call to our almanac reporter would they can publicize it.
Okay, I'll pass that on, that they should call the city of Menlo Park ahead of time.
Just a thought.
Yeah, and they could get out. I mean, what we're trying to do is build this email database so that people, if you're gonna fog that night in Menlo Park, you do a mass email that everybody will be notified that we've got a fogging going on at 10 o'clock on Alameda de la Puegas that night.
Yeah. Or door hangers.
The county-wide alert program, I would assume that would be something easy to connect into.
Okay, that's good.
And, I get it for accidents up on Summit, for this and that, but if you're doing, fogging, which is clearly a health issue, I would assume people would want to know.
In terms of your preventative program, I see you provide mosquito fish and I don't know what other preventative things that
scares for a while here, at least, 5 or 10. I've been here 35 years, so I can't remember when the last time we had a major scare here. But I think people get very complacent, and it can be a big, I was never too aware, this is a big problem. It can get out of hand real quickly.
Holy Cross is close.
Yeah, Holy Cross is close, yeah. But I know the West Nile virus is big in the Central Valley. That's where the most problems are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good, thank you. And if I don't hear from you otherwise, I'll be back in a year. Is that fair enough?
Great. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Just FYI, in Teresa's report last month on local municipal services, the Vector Control District was included as one of those services. That portfolio profile is now on the town website.
Yeah, thank you for stepping up and thank you for having some accountability in that department.
No problem. I appreciate it. I appreciate you appointing me, and I hope that you'll reappoint me next December when my term is up. So I guess I'll come in a month or two before I fill out the paperwork, and we'll see what happens.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, the next, we don't have any other presentations. Next
Correct.
item on,
Yours is an item.
am I right? No other presentations. Okay, next item on the agenda is public comments. Public comments for issues that are not on the agenda tonight. Paul?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Tonight, as a change, I'm speaking for the Rail Committee rather than for myself. And I want to report on a request that we'll present to you through several speakers. The most serious threat to the peaceful enjoyment of our town, in particular our new town center when it's built, is having high-speed trains running up and down the Caltrain corridor. And the council has properly taken a stand against high-speed rail. We in the Rail Committee have encouraged this and helped where we could. But an important adjunct to that is the recent move of the Joint Powers Board to begin the electrification project
Paul,
for
can
Caltrain.
you get a little closer to the microphone, because the people in the back are saying they can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Maybe there's not anything worth hearing, but
No,
I'll get closer.
it's all worth hearing. We just need to.
Is
I think
that
it's
better?
probably batteries. Batteries on your way.
Tap it.
Wrong people. Thank you, Chief.
You should be good to go. Okay, keep it up. Is that better?
I think so.
I don't hear it.
Can you tap it? This
Yeah,
is-
that's on. That's on.
You hear that?
I can hear it when he taps it.
I'll turn it.
Can't hear
I
it.
think
Can
you're
you
the
hear
only
me
one
when
that
I
can.
speak? Is that better?
No, not through the speakers.
Can you hear that?
There we go.
That's mine.
Oh.
It's not on. How far does that reach?
Let's see what we can do. This one over here.
Is one longer?
It's got enough.
Bottom.
There, well, we can do that.
There you
go. How about that?
That's better.
That's great. The environmental impact report that was submitted last spring for review by the Joint Powers Board, to which Atherton made responses and many made individual responses, these were largely brushed aside. The additional work that was done was minimal. It was essentially get out of our way, we want to get on with the job. And in it has made many of us, particularly on the Rail Committee, very upset with the way they're handling this, the way it is going, and we think it is very much in order that we make an official challenge to this final environmental impact report that was certified by the JPB on January 8th. We realize that this issue was brought up at your last council meeting, but there has been some new information that appear that makes it look like a more favorable situation to challenge that environmental impact report. And this is what we would like to present to you tonight. We have several speakers, and in the end we have Mike Brady, who is the attorney who is willing to initiate this for us and help us handle this, and he works for the town on a pro bono basis. But first, Jim Jantz, who is a member of our rail committee. We also have Rosemary Mulbach, who also represents the rail committee. If you have any questions of any of us, we'll be happy to answer them.
I would point out, however, Mr. Jantz and Rosemary are not speaking as members of the rail committee. They're speaking as individual citizens.
That's correct.
Thank you. Jim Jantz, speaking on to urge you to reconsider your decision last time of not filing a challenge on the Caltrain electrification EIR. I live at 95 Wilburn Avenue, and this is, as stated, my own personal opinion as someone who has lived next to the railroad tracks for 28 years. Now, why was I dumb enough to buy a house next to the railroad tracks? Because I believe in mass transit and commuting, and that my house is a third of a mile from the Atherton train station. I bought it in 1986. I have here the schedule. This is from 1990. It says Caltrain on it, and I'm not sure if, I think it was still being operated by SP at the time, but this was either shortly before or shortly after Caltrain really took over the operations themselves. And in 1990, Atherton had 9 trains stopping here in the morning on the way to the city during rush hour. A total of, I think, is 23 during the day northbound and 23 southbound during the week. After Caltrain took over, they wanted to reduce service. They wanted to put in their baby bullet and so forth. And what they started doing was reducing the number of trains serving the town. At one point early on, Phil Lively, who many of you know, he worked for a railroad for his entire career, I think, and has been on the rail committee and the commission and the planning commission for a number of years. He and I sat down and analyzed the schedule compared to the ridership numbers that Caltrain provided, and it became quite clear that they were simply reducing service, which resulted in fewer riders. And they kept doing that until it got to the point where the ridership was so low, they said, hey, ridership's too low here, we're not going to serve the station anymore. I've been involved in this for many, many years. You can't trust Caltrain is the problem. They say that they will comply with CEQA and do everything that they're supposed to do what CEQA says and to mitigate problems that come up. But if you want to challenge us, we're going to pull the STB card and say we're exempt and we don't have to follow it. Well, what good is that? I mean, they're saying they're going to do the job, but if they don't do it, the only recourse you have, which is legal recourse, they're going to say you can't use it. Now, it's certainly unclear whether the STB has the right to preempt CEQA on this or not, and that issue is still legally undecided, and others here can address that if you want to ask them the questions, Mike Brady in particular. But I understand that you don't want to look anti-Caltrain. I'm not anti-Caltrain. But look what's going to happen. If you file suit, they might get mad. Yeah, they probably will, and they'll probably say a few things that won't be too good for PR. But they'll get over it. You know, this is business. They understand it. They're playing the same game. They'll negotiate. If you don't file suit, they're going to laugh to the next step, and they'll be thrilled that no one called their bluff, and there will be no negotiation. They like to say nice things, and they're really nice during a period like this where you still got an opportunity to officially challenge them. But look at what they do. After they stopped service here, they started saying, well, if we electrified, because of the additional service and speed that we'll have, we can provide, one train can make more stops, or the same train can make it faster from one end of the route to the other, and so forth. But with electrification, we'll be able to bring service back to Atherton, wink, wink. They've been telling us this since 2004. A couple of years ago, when they were doing one of their road shows to promulgate electrification, I think it was in Palo Alto, and I attended one of their meetings, and someone asked the question, could you just, so you say, well, we can get more service with those electrified trains. Give us an example of what that more service would look like. Come up with a schedule. And so it took them a while, but they did. They came out with a so-called prototype schedule, and they had all the caveats about this doesn't mean this is what we're going to do. This is just something that could be done. And what did they have on it? They had one stop for Atherton in the morning going north, and one train stopping in Atherton at the end of the day heading south. And I said at the time, and I will repeat it, that is simply bad faith. That is not acting in good faith, and if that's the way they're going to act, we're going to have to act in the same way. I suggest that you do this. You respond by saying you really want to work with Caltrain and help them comply with CEQA and develop appropriate mitigation measures that will address the items that we've addressed and other people on the corridor have raised. And one of those things to discuss would be the level of service, because you might be able to put up with a few other negative environmental impacts that electrification might cause if you knew that we're going to provide you with some real service. And you say, you know, you really want to work with them and you trust them and you like Caltrain and boy, you really want to help them and we want to work together on mitigating these things that will help everybody on the peninsula. But just in case, we have to protect our own position, so we'll file the lawsuit. If you file the lawsuit, you don't have to, you know, immediately start acting on it. That's going to, you know, take months or years to work its way through it, and any time you can always settle on something else. It's putting the shoe on the other foot. They're saying we're gonna, you know, we're good guys. We're gonna follow CEQA, and we're gonna mitigate as best we can. But if you challenge us, then we're gonna say we don't have to do it. But we're just protecting ourselves. Well, you just take the same position. That's how you win the PR battle. We're working with them. We trust them. We love Caltrain, and we want Caltrain to serve the town. But if they don't, you know, we have to protect our own position. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Questions?
I generally get up here and harangue you about high-speed rail. William Grinley, Laurel Street. You have a presentation that Teresa forwarded you the other day that I gave to the Peninsula Cities Coalition nearly 5 years ago. And the basic thrust of that was, if you're going to look at new technologies for high speed or for Caltrain, don't look behind yourselves, which is what you're doing, but look at what the most cutting edge technology here is, and look at what the Europeans have been doing the last 15, 20 years. That presentation showed the use of two different types of technology, diesel electric motorized units and electric motorized units, and diesel also. So let me go through the pluses. The plus of that technology would be, A, that they can incrementally replace their aged rolling stock. They don't have to go out for some huge federal grant, and believe me, the federal government is not likely to hand out a lot of money for any rail system these days. Secondly, you don't have to cut trees, you don't have to hang wires, you don't have to have all sorts of transformers overhead, making a visual blight. Those are self-propelled units. You can get them in 1 story, you can get them in 2 stories. As the demonstration in the presentation showed, they operate them in Sweden and Germany with 2 stories. Now, you know, when I come down it and take myself back to my high-speed rail hat, this project of electrification, because it is compatible with the needs of high-speed rail, is a stalking horse for the high-speed rail. And to my opinion, and I don't care to work with them anymore, because 4.5 years ago, former council member and mayor Jerry Carlson and I went to them after the Peninsula Cities Coalition presentation, and they literally threw us out of their office. That was their attitude. Their attitude, just like that of the high-speed rail, is, so what? So what? We do something illegal. It's against the law. Come sue us. All right? Because they don't care. They have armies of lawyers to fight you. You have to stand up. You have to prove to them once again that this is the little town that could. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Mike Brady. I live on Forest Lane. over here in the Stone Pine area, and happy to be here this evening. I have been working against the statewide high-speed rail system for 9 years, and I filed a lawsuit 4 years ago that's called the TOS suit. That's the suit that challenges the statewide project in that it violates Proposition 1A, and that suit will probably go to trial within the next 5 to 6 months. So it's the closest to trial. It's been on file the longest. I've worked with your rail committee for many years, come to many meetings. I've been a lawyer for 50 years, and I'll tell you, there has never been an organization that I have been more delighted to work with. I've never seen more professional and skilled people. Your chairman is a PhD in engineering. He worked on the Spanish high-speed rail. He worked on the South Korean high-speed rail. They studied this project, the environmental impact report is what I'm talking about. They studied this for months. People like Rosemary wrote a wonderful letter and very detailed about the destruction of the trees, which I think is one of the most dramatic and saddest aspects of this project, how it will change the heart of Atherton. People like Jack Ringham and Paul Jones did a white paper on the modern diesel technology, the hybrids that exist today, not what's out there and that you may ride, the old diesel engines, and how this is an alternative, and that Caltrain should study this, but they didn't, even though the law, CEQA, requires them to. Just an example. The detailed 23-page letter that Atherton wrote with the comments and objections pointed out, you are not analyzing this project, electrification, in the context that it's part of a larger statewide high-speed rail system. You have to do this. They had agreed that we were right 4 years before when we made the same argument to them when they were trying to rely on an ancient EIR and just revive it. Well, when they came out with the draft EIR, they said, oh no, we don't have to do that. Ours is standalone. We don't have to analyze it as if we're part of the statewide high-speed rail system. Well, we discovered, which I pointed out to you within the last couple of weeks, a high-ranking Northern California high-speed rail authority person, Mr. Trapusis, says Caltrain electrification is an integral part of the statewide high-speed rail system and is essential. So a little conflict with the two partners in high-speed rail. And that would support a challenge, a strong challenge. So we're urging that you consider that. But most importantly, I'm urging that you consider carefully the expertise and the time put in by your committee, the studies that they did, the expert recommendations, the wonderful letters that they wrote, and honor that. They unanimously voted in November, unanimously, to recommend to you that you challenge this on the merits. Now, all public bodies hate to be making decisions in a rushed and crisis atmosphere. But that's where we are because of the law. You only have 30 days to challenge the final certification of the EIR, which was in January 8th. So a lawsuit has to be filed February 6th. That's just not very long. And the attorney has to have time to draft the lawsuit very carefully. I'd say the attorney needs about a week to draft the lawsuit. So the crisis is upon us. But I don't see much downsides. I'm going to tell you why, and I've written you on this subject. We talked to Jim Jantz and I met with two newly elected city councilmen from Palo Alto last night. They didn't know a lot about this, but they were very interested. We talked to them today. This was discussed at Palo Alto City Council last night. They're continuing to discuss it. There's a potential partner for you in a lawsuit, and a very influential partner. I'd love to see something brought by Atherton and Palo Alto together. I suggest you call those council people. Talk to them. Talk to them. See if you can work out something. Your attorney, Stuart Flashman, with whom I have worked for 4 years in my Proposition 1A lawsuit, he is a marvelous attorney, a skilled litigator, and you need a litigator. in environmental, and he specializes in municipalities. You're a municipality, you're suing another public entity. He's just a wonderful attorney. He has made an incredible offer. He says that if Palo Alto and Atherton join in a lawsuit, he will represent you for a $35,000 cap. That's the total. So you split it 50-50. $17,500 for a major environmental challenge. It's unheard of. What a deal. That's why I say there's no downsides. Pat Burt with the Palo Alto City Council the other day told High Speed Rail, look, this is complicated. We don't want to be rushed. Can you give us 30 more days to look at this thing and analyze our options? High Speed Rail said, no. I'm sorry. Caltrain said no. No extensions of time. So that's sort of their attitude. And of course they would treat you the same. But if you file a lawsuit, you've got your leverage. If you don't file a lawsuit, you lose everything. All your rights and claims under the law will disappear. So when I say you've got your leverage, you can file the lawsuit, raise your claims, put your feet on your desk, and then study what you've done and decide, do we really want to proceed with this one? Or should we possibly drop this one? Or should we concentrate on this one? It's not going to cost you anything. You've got the leisure to do that, which you will not have if you let the time run and you don't file the challenge. So I think that that offer by Stuart Flashman is a wonderful offer and would be hard to turn down. And if you and Palo Alto cooperate, you get the deal for half the price, 17 rather than 30. If you proceed alone, he'll represent you for 30, which is also a wonderful deal. And he is highly skilled, as I say. And I would finally urge you always to keep the focus. The focus, and this town, of all towns in Santa Clara and San Mateo County, has always been the most focused and loyal to the fight. The focus is to keep California high-speed rail off the peninsula because of the damage that it does. This lawsuit would be one of the arrows in the quiver. Many things are going on in the state. Environmental lawsuits, Proposition 1A lawsuits, cap and trade lawsuits. This is two more arrows in the quiver if you and Palo Alto join together. And finally, I'll close by saying that we can't go into it tonight, but within 9 days, I'm going to present you with a memo advising that you should also file a Proposition 1A lawsuit. Your claim that this violates Prop 1A is stronger than the Central Valley claim, in which I'm currently involved. And I will represent you free of charge in that lawsuit, no charge whatsoever. I've never charged anybody for my fight against high-speed rail. We don't have time to go into that. You shouldn't go into that. Just keep it in mind, but use this environmental challenge, which is very worthwhile and meritorious, and it doesn't cost you very much at all. Very little downsize. Thank you very much.
Is there any other public comment?
I turned in a card. Good evening. I'm David Schoenbrunn. I am president of TransDef, the Transportation Solutions Defense and Education Fund. We paired with the 2008 Atherton Town Council in suing the High Speed Rail Authority, and then filed additional suits in 2010, 2012, and an appeal. I think that was 2013. So we have a long history of working well with past councils. I thought I would come down tonight, introduce myself, let you know that we're interested in partnering with the town. We currently have an active lawsuit in which we have sued the California Air Resources Board, and we have asserted that they are mistaken in identifying high-speed rail as a greenhouse gas emissions reduction measure. And of course, it's that finding that allows high-speed rail to get cap and trade funds. So we we have research that says that high-speed rail will actually increase greenhouse gases because of the massive amounts of concrete it will use. So we're seeking to kick the funding out from under the High-Speed Rail Authority. We're transit advocates. We have a very different take than most litigants. We want to see high-speed rail in California, but we're convinced that the project as it's currently designed was a series of political backroom deals that don't work, that will not provide the kind of speeds that are necessary to have an economically viable high-speed rail system. So this is why we're suing. We look forward to potentially partnering with you in another suit, the 1A suit that Mr. Brady mentioned. I'm working as part of his legal team in the TAS suit. There's a lot of very interesting stuff going on with that, but in particular, I'm here tonight to introduce myself to your council and to say that we're interested and that the coalition of municipalities and nonprofits has worked really well in the past. It presents a united front that is not, it expands beyond the interests of the town to policy issues, and that's a good thing. And finally, I would throw out the idea that you have your council, your town council, speak to Caltrain and ask them for an agreement to toll the statute of limitations. See what they say. Should they happen to agree, that will give you the time to contemplate what your issues are and what you want to do. If they refuse, as they did Palo Alto, that tells you very clearly that they're not in a negotiating mode. So I think that's a useful place to go as you're contemplating your next steps. Thank you very much. Look forward to working with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lena Potts, and I work with HIP Housing in San Mateo. Excuse me. I'm just here to deliver your annual calendars. We bring these to you every year, and we really like to bring them around as a token of our gratitude to those municipalities that support us. They're absolutely adorable, as they are every year. And every illustration on the inside is done by an elementary school student throughout the county, and they all, like every year, include a quote about what home means to them. So we just wanted to bring them by as a thank you. And I'd just like to very quickly, for anyone who's not very familiar with our programming, we do have 3 programs, all of which are aimed at turning existing housing stock into affordable housing stock throughout the entire county. We have served Atherton before, and we continue to. And our home sharing program, which is our flagship program, matches people who are looking to rent out rooms in their home with someone who's looking for a place to live. And that's sort of our favorite program. It's our baby, and we hope that we can continue to see support for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My favorite calendar.
Your favorite calendar? That's what we like to hear. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Hi, good afternoon, good night. Council, Mayor, I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Francisco Vargas. I'm the new branch manager of the Atherton Public Library. And we had a very successful Sunday program where we were showcasing our MakerBot, which is a 3D printer. We printed an iPhone 6 case for you guys to have, and I'm going to share my card with you guys as well, my business card. We're just next door, and we also just last night had also an event where we served wine and cheese and crackers, and we talked about the jewels of 2014, the books that were made our, the librarian's top 10 list, and what was coming in 2015. So we're very happy to be here serving the community, and feel free to stop by and talk to me or any of my staff anytime. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Francisco. I want to invite any member of the council or the public to come by the library and check out the 3D printer.
Yes, thank you.
Easy to put in a program and have something printed.
Yes, we were thinking about actually printing everybody's name, and there's actually a very fun program where we do selfies. So we do little replicas of everybody. So we'll create your bust, and it's 3D. It's great. It takes like maybe 20 minutes at the most. So.
Can you do food?
You know, Hershey did come up with a printer that does chocolate, and our printer is very environmentally friendly, but it's not yet ready for food. But that is coming, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Francisco. Is there any other public comment? Okay, hearing no further public comment, we will move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have the written report before you. Staff is happy to answer any questions you might have. I answered a number of questions based on some one-on-one meetings with council members. Before I turn it back over to the council for that, though, I'd like the city chief of police to provide an oral presentation on priority 1 calls, just for the public's edification as well.
Mayor and member of the council, the issue of priority calls is an industry standard for emergency calls. Prior to my arrival at Atherton, previous chiefs and management staff settled on an 8-minute minimum response time for priority 1 calls. I think their theory or thought is that they wanted to make sure that the priority 1 calls, which not all priority 1 calls are emergency calls. For an example, a cold burglary is a priority 1 call, but it's not an emergency. But a burglary in progress would be an emergency call. And so we can only respond code 3 to those kinds of an emergencies that are authorized under the California Vehicle Code. So what I look for and what we should be concerned is you look at our emergency response times are about 2 minutes to emergencies. We also do a very good job of prioritizing calls. For instance, if one of our officers is en route to a lower priority call, an emergency call comes out, they'll be automatically taken off that and dispatched on the emergency calls. So the industry standard in California and probably across the nation is about 5 minutes. And so on emergency calls, we try to keep our priority 1 calls, to include emergency calls, all under 8 minutes. So forgive me if there's some confusion in that, but that's something that's been going on in the department, in the town for a long time. What I look at it, and what you guys should look at it as well and ask me about, is what does it look like over a period of time, a trend of more than a year. So if the response times are going up, which they're not, actually, they're kind of coming down, but if the response times are going up, then there could be a problem, depending on, if they're 10 minutes for an emergency call, then the chief of police should be saying, okay, what do we need to do? Do we need more officers? Do we need to deploy them differently? Are they getting backed up in the queue and dispatch? So those are the things that, as your chief of police, I look at carefully with staff. But there's nothing to be concerned about. We're doing a good job in that. Like I said, they seem to be trending downward, and that's because our staffing's coming up. So it's kind of a reverse parallel there, if you would. So if there are any other questions on response times, I'm prepared to answer them.
Actually, do a response time. Chief, thanks very much for that. It was helpful to me. As you distinguish between priority 1 calls and emergency calls, in our town, approximately how many priority 1 calls do we have over a month or a year, and how many emergency calls do we have over that same period of time?
I don't have an actual breakdown of that. I do have calls for service for the last 3 years is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000. So I don't know what the number of priority calls are. I can get that and send you guys an email. Not a problem. It's available.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm just trying to understand sort of making apples to apples kind of comparison. But I agree with you. Over time, it'd be nice to see how we're trending, and
yeah.
I'd like to understand. In some ways, an 8-minute goal seems great, but golly, if somebody's broken into your home downstairs and you hear it 8 minutes, seem like forever.
Yeah, well,
so
that's a 2-minute response for us.
Okay,
yeah, it's a high priority call, and everything else would be put on hold. And officers are trained. They hear that kind of call come out, and they're taking a report. They tell the citizen or whoever they're dealing with, hey, I'll get back to you. Here's my card. I have to leave. So that's how the training works, and that's why they can keep the response times, down to 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So we're under the the standard of 5 minutes. And, you know, one of the books I've used for years for looking at benchmarks is David Ammons, Benchmark Standing for Municipalities. And so I use that as a guide. It's not the Bible or the gospel, but certainly gives you some, you know, a benchmark to kind of target at and look at.
I think it'd be helpful to get the number of priority 1 and emergency calls at your convenience.
Through the chair. Just I want to tear off something Mike said. So when Mike said priority 1 call, would it be fair to assume that a priority 1 call to like a burglary would be code 3, sirens activated there within 2 minutes or so? Is that probably?
Yeah, if it's classified as those emergency calls,
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, that takes priority. But the way they have it set up, and I can see why it's confusing because it wasn't set up anywhere I've worked like that. But you know, we're living with it. It works well, and it's in the culture of the organization, and people internally know what they're talking about when they talk about priority 1 and emergency calls. We could do the breakout in the monthly report, city manager, and then at the end of the year we could do a roll up for you to look at. Would that be something the council would like?
I think it would be helpful to get kind of a look myself that if you're going code 3 and your response time is 2 minutes, so that way we can actually respond to people that are asking questions. It takes them 8 minutes to get my house. Well, actually, it was really 2 minutes, and so it would be helpful for us to know that you guys are actually tracking.
Yeah, and one thing you need to remember too is that the citizen will start the clock when they dial the phone, and we have to get the information, put it in the queue, and get the officer en route. So there is some lag time there, and so it could get pushed out. But most response times are weighed against from the time it's dispatched. In other words, the officer knows about it and can start traveling to the time of arrival. Not queue time backed up in the comm center or backed up on calls. That's why it's so important that citizens know for non-emergencies to call in on a non-emergency line and leave that emergency line open for those high priority emergency calls.
Chief, if you could, if you're going to make that chart and show us, you know, monthly how it's going, and you're going to have like the last year in there, could you do like a rolling 12 months? So like in March, we're going to see from March this year through March of last year. So that way we can start seeing what the trends are. That'd give us a feeling for the trend. So if it was a rolling as opposed to, you know, we start in July, and if that's month 1, then month 2, et cetera, then you have just really 2 months. But if you show all the other months and you're rolling, that would show.
Yeah, either that or a breakout of maybe the last 3 years, so you can kind of see.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Something like that. Yeah, no, I
get
it.
Yeah, and then as you move forward, a year falls off and a new year comes on. Yeah, so that'd be good. Good.
Is there any other questions for the city manager's report?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and it's actually the police department. Chief, in the city manager's report, I just wanted to compliment your 3 officers with the number of DUI arrests and the awards. Thank you for helping us keep our roadways safe and our neighbors safe as well.
Yeah, that's Officer Rickles, who we hired in September, was on training for about 3 months and has not been in the field very long, and already made 5 DUI arrests and is being recognized by MAD. That's a pretty good accomplishment, and shows that he's, you know, doing what he needs to do out there and keeping our roadways and streets safe for our citizens and visitors.
Thank you again.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. The next one is the agenda, is the consent calendar. Do you want to make a statement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have 2 comments on the consent agenda before you move forward with it. The first is, I'd like to pull item number 8 from the agenda, which is December 17th minutes. They're just not quite ready for prime time. There's a number of corrections we need to make to those. So pulling those, we'll put them back on the February agenda. And item number 2 is with respect to item number 11 on the consent agenda. The city attorneys will find that we should remove the sample contract from the RFP before its approval. So that'll be pulled out as the council works on that particular item. That's the only comments I have on the consent agenda.
Would anyone on the council like to pull any of items 9 through 14 from the consent calendar?
I would like to pull 13.
Okay. Vice Mayor Lewis?
I'd like to pull number 11 for discussion.
Okay.
question on 12. Do I need to pull it to answer the question?
That's the question. You do.
Okay, the question is we've got a government code section that specifies the city attorney is included, and I noticed that we include the city attorney separately on the appendix, which we don't do with the city manager. I just wondered why that was.
One of us is a contract employee.
Is that the answer? Okay. That is the answer. I had a feeling that's what it was, so thank you.
Does any member of the public wish to pull items 9, 11, 12, or 14 from the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none. Can I get a motion?
So moved to approve items number 9, 10, 12, and 14 on the consent calendar.
And I will second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Hearing none opposed, we'll move on to the regular agenda. The next item is number 15, which is peak democracy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm not going to give the report. I can't steal Mr. Cohen's thunder here. He's for Peak Democracy, and he's got a presentation for the council as well as some demonstrations of some other sites. Staff's bottom line recommendation is that you authorize a budget amendment of $8,000 and have staff continue to work with Peak Democracy for the town. With that, we'll turn it over to Mike, and he'll take it from here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Here's the agenda that I'd like to use for this 5 to 10 minute discussion. I'm just going to present a glimpse of our service open town hall. It would take me over 60 minutes to give you the full breadth and depth of our feature set. But in this glimpse, I'll start with a brief introduction to the company, just a minute or two, so you know a little bit more about us. I'll focus on some examples, live demos on the web, and then I'll leave time for Q&A in this 5 to 10 minute discussion. In my demos, I'm going to feature some very local client government agencies like Palo Alto Menlo Park, and then based on some of the topics mentioned in the staff report, I'll also perhaps pick some of these themes from cities in the Bay Area. But feel free to ask me questions during and after the examples. So our company's vision is simple. We think that online civic engagement will become pervasive across all government agencies. It's just a matter of time, whether that's 2 or 12 years from now, it's hard to guess. And we think that it's inevitable because online civic engagement can dramatically improve the government's interactions with its community. That's if it's done right. And that's our mission. We're doing online civic engagement to increase public trust in government. Here are the co-founders, Robert and I. We have experience both in the computer industry and in local government. In fact, I started a company, co-founded a company with Atherton resident Tom Prue, who lives over near 280. Here's a summary of the company's stats. Let me go to our website here. Let's see. We have, we're working with over 100 government agencies. We powered over 1,800 online forums that have attracted over 250,000 people, and we have a huge list of testimonials here. Our objective is not just to satisfy our government clients. We want to thrill and delight you with the quality of both our software and also our people service. This is a lot about being with your staff on a topic-by-topic basis to help you frame and launch topics that, again, will increase public trust in government. By the way, the MTC is one of our biggest clients here. There's Palo Alto. And it keeps going. Oh, Aspen, by the way, is a city of about 7,000, but slightly different demographic. We have very high renewal rates for our clients. In fact, Palo Alto and Jim Keene, the city manager, one of our earliest clients. Then we have a lot of partnerships as well. And this is just a snapshot of some of our clients. You can see these first set here. This is all in California, in the Bay Area. So we have about 30 Bay Area clients. And that's my summary of the company. Let me move to some demos here. Let's start with, this is Palo Alto. Here's their homepage. You can see right here they have a link to, they call their service Open City Hall. You can call it whatever you want, Open Town Hall, Open Atherton. So if I click on that. So first they have one topic that's currently open. You can see the open tab here. That's the closed tab. Just to show you some of the recently closed topics. This is just some of their, they then archive their older topics in a separate web page. But you can see they did a topic on carbon neutrality. They're doing some land use and topic on technology. But this open topic is on priorities for the City Council in 2015. And you can see that over 400 people have already attended the forum, and over 180 people have posted a response.
Question.
Sure.
You can get this by going to their homepage, but it can also be emailed to you.
Oh, good question. In fact, most people encounter the topic by getting an email and a direct link to what I'll click on right now. That's the general. So when they go right to the topic, you'll see, by the way, one other thing I want to mention, this is in Palo Alto's website. We just put an iframe in there. It's very simple to do. It takes a few minutes of your staff time. Then it's all of our technology from it. It's all cloud-based. So we could put this also, for example, in the Atherton website. We can put in this big white square here, for example, or on a dedicated web page, whatever works for you. You can see here's an introduction, and this introduction for a lot of topics can contain video and all kinds of graphs and animations and things. It's a great way to educate the community, not just get feedback. If I read more here, you can read a little bit more about it. Then over the top here, we have a series of tabs where people, for example, can click to see who's listening, and sometimes we put photos of city managers or city council people here or mayors. You can see that this stat says that if these 183 people were in a public hearing and speaking for about 3 minutes each, that would be equivalent to over 9 hours of public hearings, so kind of a marathon public hearing. If I post a response to show you how that would work, this happens. You can configure topics in all kinds of ways, from complex surveys to simple open-ended questions. We also have ways you can use maps and priority lists and even budgets in a topic. This is a simple survey. It's asking you to put in 2 or 3 of your top priorities. You can decide whether you want to show your name or not. That's an option that Palo Alto turned on. And then you have to show your address, and that's how you can post. I'm not going to post a comment here. I'm just going to jump to the feedback now.
And can you offer a drop-down menu that could give the community member some options that they could choose, or is it solely their own input?
Well, you can you can configure a topic. For example,
like they've asked for your 3 top priorities for the year, and I'm wondering if, and clearly somebody can input anything that they want that they identify as their priorities.
Right.
But can you also serve to them a drop-down menu that could give them some topics that different people have selected?
Yes, as a matter of fact, on the very next topic, I'll show you Menlo Park. They actually posted 3 alternatives. And you can drag and drop them up or down and decide which of your 3 are your priorities. So there are literally dozens of ways we can configure topics, and it's very easy, all menu driven. But in this glimpse, I'm only showing you a few. But if I have time and you have questions, I'll show you some really kind of cool stuff that's more advanced than just 3 simple questions like this. But you can see now I'm in the feedback, and you can look at everyone's individual feedback. You or the community can always do a full PDF report of all the feedback or download a spreadsheet file. And this is our Insight dashboard. We make this dashboard available to the community as well as staff and the government officials because we feel that transparency helps build consensus in the community. And so, for example, we can look at a summary of the feedback. Now, because this was a simple 3-field survey, the summary just produces a word cloud. But what's interesting about this word cloud is it can show you qualitatively what people are saying is most important on their priorities. Obviously, you can see housing there, and traffic was mentioned. But it's interesting. I never realized noise was such an issue here. But now I click on noise, and you can see this person saying reducing airplane noise, or airplane noise. So you can see all these people were talking about airplane noise. So this is kind of an interesting analysis tool to look at the feedback qualitatively. Let me show you, by the way, you can look at, we can easily map Atherton with all kinds of overlays. This first example is Palo Alto by neighborhoods. And you can see I can move the cursor around and look at different neighborhoods, and I can click on a neighborhood and look at, for example, the 17 people that mentioned in this Midtown West neighborhood. Let me show you some other examples by going to another city. Let's go to Menlo Park. This is their homepage. They call their service Speak Up Menlo Park. And you can see, again, here's some of their current topics. Also have a topic they just launched on 2015 council goals. But they just closed a topic on a general plan topic, and this is configured just the way you described it. So this is, they had they asked for general ideas, and it came up, then they summarized into 3 general ideas, and so they had over 400 people come online and post over 150 priority lists. So let me show you what that looks like. So here's the introduction. If I go to the priority list, so for example, this is Skip inside Menlo Park. Here's his comment. Here's how he dragged and dropped the 3 priorities that they suggested. And I can click on this to learn more about him. If this were an open topic, I'd go to it and you can see how they would configure it nice and clearly. Here's Tronia, also inside Menlo Park. Here's her comment. Here's her priorities. By the way, they also turned on what we call the support feature. So I can support someone's comment. Some people don't like to write something, but they'll support another person's comment. Then you can look at the feedback based on number of supporters. And then we have some analysis tools for that. So you can look at individual feedback. You can look on the inside dashboard, the average feedback. You can look at the feedback across all the maps. So for example, this is Menlo Park, and they also gave us an overlay for something called next door neighborhoods. This is another Government 2.0 service. But I can look at each neighborhood and see the different priorities, and then click on that neighborhood and drill down. If you have a land use project that has an address, we can look at the feedback based on distance from the project. Some topics are very amenable to demographics. We can do all kinds of demographics. This is first by age group, and you can see the different priorities for each age group. You can do it by gender. Whatever you want, this is options you can turn on and off. So, oh, by the way, we also have an advanced search mechanism. You can see, by the way, I noticed that, yeah, someone from Atherton is participating already in the Menlo Park topic. Let's see. Does anyone know Peter Carpenter? Here's his priority.
Never heard of him.
Let's see. I could proactively show you a budget topic and a land use topic. Would you like me to take a few more minutes, or you just want to ask questions? Or?
I think the budget ones could be exciting.
About 20% of our topics across the country are land use, and another 20% are all budget related. They're fiscal budgets or project budgets. So let's go to, this is Salinas. And you can see that they, for their budget, they have a quick version that takes 5 minutes and another version that takes over, about 15 minutes. And they've had over 85 people do this budget one. So let's just go to that topic. And here's the introduction. And this is a nice graphic that they produced about their priorities. If I had more time, I'd go through this more slowly. But just kind of, again, educating the community on priorities. Then if I go to post, this is just one example of, again, of a way to configure a topic. So I can go to effective mobility, read about it, and then put in, this is how I'm going to allocate, sorry if I went too fast here. I'm allocating $500 in funds across all their priorities. So I'll put, $39 there or whatever. And you can see up here, a chart starts to build. You can do this, by the way, in real time, in kind of a public hearing. I can post, something here, and you can keep going, and then, build your. By the way, you can always post a comment, and also post a photo or video as part of your comment. And then if I go to the feedback, I'm not going to post that. Let me just leave that page. You can now look at the different budget priorities. So, for example, this is Janabel inside Salinas. He had one priority: everything on family-oriented community stuff. That's making a statement. They turned on this feature, name not shown. So these people are not anonymous. They've had to completely be authenticated by us. But if you turn on name not shown, then maybe some members of your community can post something without getting any kind of, retribution or anything. But it's just an option you can turn on and off if you want. But you can see this person's, here's their budget, and some people posted a comment along with their budget. So you can look at individual budgets. You can produce a nice report of all the budgets. You can look at budgets average across. This is average across all the users, so you can see, again, family-oriented feedback was the highest budget. You can look at them on the maps, and the demographics, and word clouds, and so forth. Again, I realize I'm short on time, so I can show you other topics or just open it up for questions. Any feedback?
Questions? I have a question.
Right.
Your website says, I believe, that the license fee for municipal
ranges from 5,000 for the very smallest communities up to over 30,000 for some of our communities are over 1 million.
So it depends on the size of your town?
The size and demographics.
And where does Atherton fit in that mix with 6,900 residents?
So we have, I think in the staff report, we have a price of 8,000. And by the way, there's a lot more here. Like for example, we have software and staff that's monitoring all of your comments in real time for civility, and through the big P's, personal attacks, profanity, and impertinent comments and things. And so we have a whole process that we take care of for that as well. There's a lot more under the hood here, but that's the pricing.
Any control on inaccurate information posting?
Well, if it's only if it's a personal attack. Or if it's not pertinent. So, for example, if someone posts an advertisement, our software and staff will catch it. We'll move it to a separate web. First, we'll confirm with the staff that it's an appropriate comment. And when they do, we move it to a separate web page. You can make that web page public or private. If you make it public, it has a warning. Then we notify the author. We explain the problem, and we invite them to bring it back into into compliance with the form.
So you also don't have problems with the same poster posting the same thing to try to stack, let's say, a section?
Well, as a matter of fact, in our detailed presentation, that's one of the ways we build public trust is in mitigating undue influence. And there's actually 4 categories of undue influence we mitigate. One of them is fraudulent feedback. So if a person tries to amplify their opinion by posting multiple times under fake registrations, our software will catch that. And the staff person will look at it, and it's amazing how you can tell whether that's 2 spouses from the same home or someone just cutting and pasting and wants to make a statement. We monitor IP address and browser ID, browser cookie, to help understand who's posting multiple times fraudulently.
Good. A quick question about ownership of the data. Is there, what do you guys retain, if anything, and is there any, if an individual enters a comment, is that data go anywhere outside of the city? Is he going to be contacted in 6 months or a year?
Yeah, we've worked this out. We've been doing this for several years now, and here's what we found works the best in the United States, at least, is that the data. First of all, there's several categories of data. There's we don't collect any really personal information like credit card or Social Security. Most of the times we collect, you can actually find on the web, anyways. But for the general forum data, first of all, it all resides in our servers because it's cloud-based. If the city says they want the data for, and we have a very simple privacy policy. We never release anyone's personal information without their permission unless we are required to do so by law. So if someone has a public records request, as someone did down in Encinitas, California, we'll simply release that information. And by the way, it takes no staff time. If you want to move all the data to your servers, you can simply ask for a public records request, and we'll just send you the file. But all the data, you can see that every one of these forums. Let me show you something right here. Let me just turn that off. And you see, every form has anyone can produce a PDF or a spreadsheet file, and the spreadsheet file includes metadata. So basically, this is the first time in thousands of forums that we had someone in Southern California ask for it, but we almost never get any public records requests because it's all accessible through the forum.
So all the information you collect as far as where there are things like that, that's all volunteered by the subscriber.
Right.
So.
And
respondent.
2 questions. Are you able to, a person has to register with you in order to respond, correct?
Not quite. Again, in order to, registration, there are pros to it because it gives you, makes the comments tend to be more civil, more credible, and also gives you better analysis tools. The trade-off is that some people across the country, perhaps even in Atherton, feel that, A, if they want to respond quickly, it takes too long. B, there's even with some simple information, they feel it could be a privacy issue. And C, some people feel like for government agencies to have a public forum that requires registration it could violate the free speech. So we always allow anyone to post, and what they do is they get a PDF. If they don't want to register, they can send that PDF to the government staff through email, through fax, or just hand deliver it. So we always provide options. And then we have gradations of it. For example, you can use your social media credentials to help your registration as well. Sorry about the long answer, but I thought about it a lot.
But if, so if a respondent registers, then they can just post online, is that right?
Yes, right. So you can.
And can you make their contact information available to the town? Like we have an outreach program in the town, and I mean we try to capture people's email addresses however we can in order to boost up the number of participants in that outreach program.
Right.
Would the people coming into this site be available to? Can you make that available to the town?
Right. Yes. So we built a really nice subscriber list for you. And you can use that email almost like a CRM system. So, for example, in Palo Alto, you can see I'm a special user here. This admin button here, so I just turned on their admin mode. And if I go to reports, you can see that we have for Palo Alto about 1,000 subscribers, and you can see the growth in the service over the years. So that's one way you can help and reach out to the community and inform them of stuff. Right?
Do you tell them that you're going to give the city their address?
Well, when they subscribe, they're acknowledging that they can get. Again, we never release their information unless they give us permission, required to do so by law. But the subscription, if you go through the process, says, okay, then your city may contact you on topics related to the city government, because that's who's captured. But we're not in the advertising business. We're not even in the data sales.
So so if they subscribe, then that address can be made available to the city and it can be included in our database.
Right.
But we wouldn't, I don't think we would want to blanketly take their email and add it to all of our electronic
Not unless they opt in.
Right. Exactly.
They have to opt in.
They opt in when they subscribe. When they register, they don't have to subscribe. When they subscribe, they're opting in to feedback from the service. And for example, almost all of our clients, if I go to this topic again, they post an outcome statement. You can see it right here. And that outcome statement is a great way to close the loop with the community. Just let them know that you acknowledge your feedback. So it gets posted on the website, but it also gets emailed to them, to the subscriber list. And it's a great way, again, to build public trust by, and that's one way you can use the subscriber list.
Can we help craft that, or is that canned?
Oh, no. Well, we in order to, one of our other things we pride ourselves on is minimizing staff time. So we have all kinds of easy templates, but I can show you some very elaborate outcome
So you
statements.
can craft it, but you have a template.
Yeah.
Well, we could craft it so that it says, we're going to sign you up for the Atherton Online, but that's it. If you want to subscribe to anything else, the electronic news flashes and things, then you need to opt in to all of those.
Because I would think that some people might want to put their input in, but they don't want somebody from the city calling and saying, why did you say this? Or we didn't understand what you said. That might be intimidating. So they don't want, they're willing to give the information, but they may or may not want to, have their data be able to go to the city so that the city can contact them.
It sounds like there's flexibility to manage that, and we'll address that as we get
I would just have it as an opt-in if you want to be on the list.
General question, a different direction. Have you found that this increases or decreases or affects in any way the public participation at public meetings?
In general, we have a lot of anecdotal evidence that I can even show you some really radical stuff. For example, in Berkeley, where if the online forum matches the public hearing, then that gives the council more confidence that they really understand the public sentiment. If the online forum is in conflict with the public hearing, that can give them pause, and sometimes it gives the council the political fortitude to say that the public hearing does not represent the community. Again, I can show you a great example you want to see in Berkeley.
Time out. There are some legal issues that you're addressing now that could be problematic. For instance, when there's a public hearing, they can only rely on information in the record. What you're talking about isn't in the record.
Oh,
And so what I'm trying to say, for instance, they can't post themselves because 3 of you post, you violate the Brown Act. And so there are some issues where this can be used as a very good tool. I see that, but you have to be careful because this is extraneous to the record on the issues that are in front of the council. And if you allow that, then you have to prove that these people are who they say they are. And there's a whole lot of other issues that could become involved. So I think we have to be careful when we say these could be used to validate the record. Well, no, it can't. You have to rely on the record and nothing else.
Right. I agree with you. So, some best practices some cities use is if they have a topic that's related to a public hearing topic, they'll post it online maybe when the staff report's available, and they'll upload the staff report to this. And then they'll close the topic just a day or so before the public hearing. And then they'll produce a PDF of it and enter it into the public record. And then, you know, we give it to the council and have it in back, you know, in paper copy. So that's one way they're trying to formalize it as just another source of channel information, like you get an email from someone from the community.
And this is at no cost to the respondents.
Oh,
yeah, zero. Even the subscription, they're not a subscriber. They're not paying to use this.
Right. And again, we're not in the advertising or data sales business, so this is purely just the government's our client.
Your annual fee of $8,000 is it the end, or is there any add-on costs?
No, because I said we try to delight and thrill our government clients, there's no hidden cost. And by the way, and that includes, again, we're with you on a topic-by-topic basis to talk to you about any subtle issues that you might have related to, for example, legal issues, or how to frame a question so you don't create like something we call referendum effect. Sometimes, years ago when cities used this service, they posted in a way that it effectively create a referendum online that could usurp the decision-making authority of staff. So again, we're there with you to prevent these pitfalls, and so you know, got a lot of experience with that.
So, are there any other questions or clarification? Let me open it for public comment. Is there any public comment on this issue? Okay.
Just a question. I don't really understand how decision makers use your data.
You can think about, first of all, it depends on the decision, on the topic, whether it's a budget topic or a land use topic or a topic of interest to staff. I mean, for example, let me look at San Carlos. This is their homepage. Here's their open topic. Look at all the questions they're asking, just to get feedback. Underground utilities, new sidewalks, high school, dog park. It's just another channel of communication with the community, and it happens to be a channel that a lot of people, especially in the peninsula here, like electronically. So it lowers barriers of participation, so it augments and diversifies the kind of people that can give feedback. Not everyone has the time or inclination to come to a public hearing because they're parenting and working, you know, going to school and so forth. So it's just another channel of communication, and it can be used in all kinds of topics.
Comments?
Wouldn't it be fair to say that staff could use it in preparation for something, saying that they put something on here, X information comes out, giving it back to council through staff report, so then subsequently we review it at the time we're considering something. So it's a tool to get information to council members, I would assume.
Right.
Correct?
In some cases, it's used for council and commission topics. In some cases, just for staff topics. Some cases, the planning department is using it quite a bit for just land use topics. We have a topic in Palo Alto. The Art Commission used it on a major fountain design in Palo Alto. So it's you know, the whole gamut. And, you know, by the way, you can start with just simple softball topics. You can even start with a simple internal topic, just to get staff familiar with it. That's only available to staff, just like I can show you examples of that. For example, Santa Ramon uses it for a lot of internal topics.
Chickens.
Oh yeah, and then chickens. Let me show you just one other thing. So I'm going to go into.
I think it's goats.
Goats. I'm in admin mode, and we have this very popular now. It's a knowledge base. You can do all kinds of searches on thousands of topics across the country. So if I type in like chickens and hens here, you can see that people. I should type it in correctly here.
You got to drop down and click the bottom one.
Yeah. So Virginia Beach did a big topic on backyard. Rancho Cordova, I can show you a topic. It's a well-run city in Central California, Los Alamos County, Ferguson. So a lot of people doing topics on urban zoning for chickens. And so if I go to
reinvent the wheel. I think it's one of the things you told me, Mike. We can copy another agency's format templates and everything, move it over to ours, change all the data, and make it a.
Yeah, so you can see right there, it's, you can copy it to your form. It's like a topic library. You can use, sometimes their graphics are excellent, their photos are excellent. You can even contact them and get advice if you want on the topic. Some of these topics are very controversial.
Well, I'll make a comment. One of my priorities over this year was to recognize the really excellent work that's been done by the prior two councils and the staff to improve the data that the town makes available to the residents and the transparency with which that data is made. It was really an access kind of solution that I think is proven to be excellent, and what I felt where we lacked was the pull. We were pushing really well, but we weren't pulling. We did, especially as we have these 3 additional master plans coming in, there's going to be priorities that we need to understand the residents' attitude on these priorities. I think it's a really important issue because there's going to be costs that exceed our budget, and we can go out individually and solicit that information. We work hard to connect to them through email systems, but this looks like a tool that we can use like Palo Alto did in asking their citizens what their 3 top priorities were. I think this fits right into that plan of pulling information and helping the residents to set their priorities. I like that a lot.
I think it's an exciting opportunity for us, and it's certainly been, we're not on the cutting edge of using a new technology. It's certainly been used in the past, and we've learned lots of lessons, and we'll continue to refine it, I'm sure, legal issues aside, and incorporate checks and balances. So I think it would be well worth our investment to give it a try.
So I'm just going to say that Councilmember Lemprest and myself were in Sacramento, and one of the biggest topics was technology. It's not going away. And this is just another tool that I can see us utilizing, staff utilizing, to assist us in the decision-making process as it's properly disseminated to us, of course. So I think goats would be a good topic for us.
No, chickens.
Yeah, we already had the goats.
And just in the last campaign that was went through, one of the big issues that we talked about that I think actually all the candidates agreed upon was that we need to make more of an effort to do what we could to hear more clearly the voice of the residents of Atherton on different issues. And I think we've got to do some different things to get that done. And this one feels good. Feels all right.
So, there's a saying. It says, "Plan your work and work your plan." I think it's a great system. I do, and I appreciate the overview. And I think it would be helpful in the budget. Although I also have mixed feelings because I think that it's something that perhaps, as opposed to doing it immediately, my initial inclination would be put it in the budget. We should be putting it in the budget and having it implementing at mid-year. I'm not hard over on that feeling, because I do think I think the system is a lot more powerful than I had originally had anticipated, and when I did my own investigation on it, it seems to have a lot more value, I think, to all of us in helping us understand really what the feelings are of the community. So but I would like to see that as we make it effort to move forward, so that we don't just say, hey, here's a great thing, let's bring it in, even though it wasn't planned for. We should be getting into doing planning, setting a budget, and not continually changing the budget and amending the budget to add something we think we forgot, or it's a new whiz bang. So, but I don't want to stand in the way of this. This is a good system, and thank you for pointing out that Peter Carpenter is an avid user of it. He'll blend right. He'll be one of the big users of this, I'm sure.
So just a point of reference. Mr. Carpenter is an Atherton resident. He's also an elected official on the Menlo Park Fire District Board. So he's very involved and interested in Menlo Park issues as well. So he kind of straddles both. And East Palo Alto, yes, because of the Fire District Board.
He's on all
membership.
He's on all the boards anyway, regardless.
Oh, of course he does. So, there you go. Explained.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Can we get a motion?
I'll move. resolution for the City Council authorizing a budget amendment for public outreach and citizen engagement for $8,000 to transfer from our FY 2014-15 unappropriated general fund reserve to our fiscal year 2014-15 administration, other contract services, community activities and events, account number so that we can purchase the open city.
Well, it's a lease. It's a lease.
Lease it.
Actually, I
Well,
don't think we're purchasing anything.
it's a,
Yeah, it's a lease.
it's a
Offers
fee.
It's an ASP, right?
It offers a service.
Right.
Software, yeah, contract.
And that was the same thing I said.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
You talk fast.
It's been a pleasure working with you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, this one is the receiving the report for the final impact report for, yeah, you will. Right, for the Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project and authorize the mayor to transmit a comment on it.
And this, at this time, I'm going to have to recuse myself for this matter in the interest of prudence, I guess, until we get it nailed down, but because of the proximity of my home to the right-of-way.
So, you know, you have to go stand outside.
Or he can go in the
This is not raining.
I've been put outside before, and it was cold and rainy, so. Thank you.
So you have the staff report and the attached letter. Staff is prepared to answer any questions you might have. This did receive comments from the town's rail committee. So that feedback is also brought into the letter. And like I said, we're happy to answer any questions that the council might have. The staff's recommendation is approval of the letter and issuing it to Caltrain.
Are there any questions of clarification from the council?
First off, I guess an item that ended up in the papers about standing in front of trains. I just thought that was a little, maybe it was a tongue-in-cheek thing, but I thought it was kind of an inappropriate comment to be in a staff report that ended up getting put in the paper. I know that how we feel about the high-speed rail, and I think we all feel that same way, but standing in front of a train isn't a laughing matter. Especially since we regularly have people attempting to do that here, and I think that it was inappropriate. Also, I think that some of the arguments that were made today, I think we need to potentially take into consideration, and I think that I would be in favor of the mayor considering having another session, closed session, to discuss this matter once again.
Are there any questions or clarification?
I have no questions or clarifications. I have some comments to
Does
make.
anyone from the public have a question or clarification? Or public comment? Let's move it to public comment.
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
I would agree with Mr. Oh, sorry. Rosemary Malvich. Agree with Mr. Widmer's comment. I thought it's a serious letter. It's not a point of being sarcastic or dramatic or whatever the tone was. I think it needs to be. I would take the "we'll stand in front of the train" out. It doesn't sound professional enough to me. And the other point was discussing with Caltrain pros and cons of returning service to Atherton. I think it's very clear that most of us believe that we have a train bisecting our town, and it is a convenience for us, either who use it regularly for commuting. It is a commuter train, and we appreciate that service and would not want it to be eliminated. The weekly service to be reinstated is a very healthy thing. The other thing that I would like clear, and I read, I'm feeling very modern about it, I read the blog responses to Rick's letter. And there were quite a few very negative comments about the letter and about people supporting some as much as high-speed rail, some just electrification. But I'm afraid that a lot of those people don't read the detailed EIRs that we do, and they're buying the marketing that's going on about what electrification is going to do for the town. And in fact, my comments are relevant to Atherton, but they're relevant to the San Francisco Peninsula. Electrification is going to take out trees and vegetation, and it's going to add things like poles, like 36 poles in the 7/10 of a mile of Atherton's rail right-of-way. We only have 7/10 of a mile. And these poles, these that are to hold up the wires, they're not like the 6 or 8 inch poles you might think of in your patio that's a roof support or something. They are 18 to 24 inches, and they have 36 of them designated for the 7/10 of a mile. And these are significant objects. Around those poles, there have to be 10 feet cleared around the pole of the vegetation. What's vegetation? That's bushes and screening. So it's not just the trees. And the trees that they're talking about eliminating are old, 150 years probably. A lot of them, not all of them, obviously. And the Caltrain is going to replace them with young trees, some of them 3-to-1. But those will be someplace else, and that will not do what the older trees do along here for screening. This is relevant not just to Atherton, but to the many peninsula towns that have significant trees and vegetation near it. So for people who criticize us and say we're behind the times and objecting to this, we're not behind commuter rails, but we're behind. We recommend that we respect the 17 communities that are between San Jose and San Francisco. And what would we be losing all this for? Very little gaining of time. People have bought the marketing. They think if we electrify, we're going to get to San Francisco really fast, or San Jose. Read the details, folks. That's not going to happen. So my comments about the letter are as Mr. Widmer's go, and that we do support commuter rail. We want to have service back. But we do need to respect the kinds of communities the train's going through, and be sure that we have changes that are to the advantage of all the riders. Thank you.
Paul Jones again. I'd like to endorse Councilman Widmer's proposal. I think that would be a very wise thing to do.
David Schoenbrunn, Transdev. You might find it useful to hear the opinion of a transit advocate in a project that is supposed to provide tremendous benefits for transit. We're of the opinion that the amount of money that is proposed to be spent in terms of reducing greenhouse gases could be far better spent in some other cost-effective transit project that would have a substantial increase in ridership. And so we don't think that this investment makes sense. So essentially what I'm offering you is taking it down off of its moral high ground and saying that they've had this idea for 30 years, and quite frankly, they never reconsidered it. I sent them a letter saying that they had tied their wagon to the high-speed rail project, and that if the high-speed project failed, they would find themselves without any pathway forward. And I suggested that they have a fallback plan, which would be the hybrid electric diesel multiple units, something that you heard about from the Rail Committee. And they were not interested, and even went to the extent of saying not feasible, which was their language for we don't want to do it. So just thought that that might provide a little bit of context as you make your decisions about your letter tonight. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to council.
Yeah, well, I think that this is something that we've got to bring back up, and obviously that's a closed session item, but I think there's some other information that we need to get, obviously, as well, before that closed session, some contact. I think that Mr. Brady and such made comments related to the contact with Palo Alto. I think that'd be helpful in the session, having that information, so if we can get a closed session scheduled in, and I think we got a time frame of the 6th, so it doesn't leave us much time, frankly, to get that information and get a closed session in. But it doesn't eliminate the fact that we moving forward related to this letter.
Well, can I ask Bill a question with regards to this? When I read Rick's letter, it doesn't necessarily say, hey, it says we've reviewed it and we continue to have concerns, etc. Could we amend the letter to say, and we request more time for discussion, and not necessarily say in the letter, because it doesn't really say that, we approve, we're going along with you. It just says we've got these concerns and perhaps we want some more time.
I think that if the council wants more time, which is a fair request, we need to contact them directly by phone or email, because if we send them something, a letter, they're going to say, I didn't get that letter. It must have been mailed on Thursday. I didn't get it till Monday. And we had to have staff review it and talk about it. They're going to mail it back to you on Thursday, just in time for us to really be too late to have a closed session of any kind, if the council so desires.
Okay, good point.
If one asks for a tolling agreement to draw this out for 30 days or 60 days or whatever, I think staff should contact them directly and ask for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good point.
Is that similar to what, I apologize for jumping in, is that similar to what Mr. Brady mentioned, getting it on record, what Pat Burke said through the mayor, so that they basically give us the no and we document that as their formal answer?
Yeah, sometimes it's who you talk to, so my attitude is if you don't try, you don't know, and so I think it's fine for staff to contact them and see, if maybe the second one that calls, they're going, they're starting to beat the war drums. Maybe it'd be better for us to talk to them and let's have some discussion. So I think that's a fair request to ask them if they'll stay the need to file a lawsuit quickly and give us some time to talk to them and discuss it.
We could suggest we delay our closed session.
No, that's got to go parallel.
I think that the general consensus here, after receiving all of the public comment and the input from our rail committee members, Rosemary and Paul and Jim and Mike Brady, and the offer and the new information about the other potential inaccuracies that would give us pause to have to discuss all of that in a closed session meeting. We need to kind of put that on the agenda as soon as possible. And I think the mayor has an idea about what date that might be.
Well, I think there's three, just from a facilitation perspective, there's three separate things that we're dealing with here. One is scheduling a closed session. Second is whether we want to ask for more time, that is extend this 30-day period, which we would need to do by having staff make a phone call, and then the third is consideration of the letter.
Well, and there's also calling Palo Alto and having a discussion with Palo Alto.
Right.
So let me start just with the issue scheduling a closed session. We have a joint session with the CCAC on January 27th, Tuesday, at 12:30. If everybody would be available, Mike doesn't really matter because he can't be in on it, but if
Poor
four
Mike.
of us would be available at 11:30 that day, and that would be convenient for us to have the closed session immediately prior to the joint session.
That's fine, fine with me.
Does that work? Okay, can we do that? Okay, then I think the second issue is requesting more time to extend this 30-day limit. And if everybody agrees with that, we can ask staff to proceed and do that.
We have to get on, I think we have to get on record.
Yes, it has to
Absolutely.
be on record.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
whether or not it's just a phone call from staff, or if you write, you know, as the mayor from council, that council deliberated is requesting this, you know.
Well, we can send that out
requesting, you can
tomorrow,
send that as
but-
an email and also call them.
Yeah.
So just don't send an email and think that they've gotten it.
We like a little trail.
Because, I was at the,
Well, we can do that tomorrow.
I'm old school, I believe in telephone.
yeah, both,
Yeah.
I think
About
both,
we-
I'm new
both
school, I
would be.
believe
About we call them, we draft a small letter from the mayor requesting an additional amount of time to
Yes.
review the EIR. We
Right.
send
And
follow-up
talk with
email
them
and
to
mail
travel.
letter.
Yeah, I would just say with the letter, just say, you know, pursuant to my, as a follow-up to my call, here's the record, because as Bill said, they could be saying, well, I sent you, oh, you didn't get it.
No.
Yeah.
Understand, we sort of understand the game.
Yeah.
And for us, what we do is we call and we talk to them and say, this is what we would request from you. And is that going to be something that could be done quickly and at the staff level? And if so, could the director do it or whoever? And if so, we need to see it in writing. Because just talking and saying, oh, sure, we're going to do that doesn't mean anything. So until we get it, it doesn't matter.
And can I make one other comment through the mayor? Is that if we wanted to modify your letter to incorporate that we are insisting on a level of service be acknowledged, because the EIR, the level of service is just not given enough importance to Atherton.
Yeah, your section, the section on Atherton statement doesn't really say any level of service. It just says reopen it, et cetera. I think,
The
yeah.
level of service,
Yeah.
the increased level of service is very important.
We want it defined.
Yeah.
Right. Not two stops.
Service once a day isn't really service.
They-
One
they
in, one
talk
out.
One in, one out.
So are you suggesting we modify the letter to suggest a level of service?
Well, yeah, I would-
Or to tell them we want to define level of service beyond minimum?
Well, let's say prior to the cutbacks, or say to the 1990s.
Yeah, to the level of service.
That we enjoyed in the mid-90s, because that's when we had the 6 to 8 stops.
And honestly, that type of survey or polling would be, I think, really important for our residents, and we could use this new tool that we're just talking about.
I think the level of service is also going to have to be when, because they've always pointed it's then and how much. What is the level of service going to
How
be
many?
at when, at what
But the
point?
how much question
How many?
and frequency, you know, there may have been a higher ridership back in the 90s than there is now. And if we increase the level of service, are we encouraging that higher ridership? And do we have, or will we have, the capacity at this area here, once we do the Civic Center project, for higher usage?
So is the question maybe the threshold? What's the threshold to get service? At what, do they have a threshold that they?
Parking is my concern.
Well, when they cut the service back, they had all those factors in the paper, and if I remember right, we had like 5 people taking the trains, but I agree with Mr. Jantz's assessment that they cut the service back, then they did measurements. They didn't have the commute trains come through here, so the majority of the service people had to go either to Redwood City or Menlo Park, and so now you just had the casual guy going up there for luncheon or going, at that time they didn't even have the ballpark going. It was shortly thereafter. So you didn't really have the service, and so it was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
But as you know, that the philosophy in the growth of Caltrain is one station fills, we're not going to build more parking, you're going to go to the next station. So therefore, our ridership is not going to be most likely a majority of Atherton. It'll be our neighboring cities because their parking lots get overflowed. So therefore, the idea of asking the question of what ridership and numbers is going to trigger this is going to be an important factor, because there are other factors that the town's going to have to consider when we do get those increased numbers and traffic flow. So we're going to have a balance of how much and when and what, you know.
It's an important thing to understand, the number of ridership and potential because of potential parking issues.
It's an important issue, but it's more of a conversation than
It is more of a
than a
conversation.
statement than the demand. Is my, I guess my
Unless you have a real number in mind. I mean, quite frankly, the lawyer says if it's 0 now and you go to 1 a day, that is an increase. And if you give them the opportunity to say it's an increase, that's what they're going to say. But if you say, well, it's got to be at least 5 or 10, or like Jim Jan said, it used to be 23 a day in each direction.
Well, it was only on the hourly ones. And that was before they had the commuters. The commuters took a lot of and that's how they got those bullet trains going, is that they took out stations like ours and so that they would have the tracks cleared for people to shoot up there. And then we would get service immediately after that would start like at 9 o'clock, and that would be, it would take an hour then to get to San Francisco because you stopped at every location, including the race park.
Right. So, and understand they're also, they say the more efficiency in the trains, there are going to be more trains per hour. So all these are going to be factors that, you know, we're going to have to consider. But I guess you're right. The legal counsel would say 1 train more a day is more trains and more service. 100% increase.
It's 100% increase.
So let's.
So at least 5 round trips a day. That'd be one number you can throw out, and a stop during each commute hour. I don't know. It would take the rail committee to say what they want.
Well, and I think it's also difficult because you have bullets and you have. I mean, some people.
We're not going to have a bullet.
No, the bullet won't stop.
Some people probably like a bullet, but the reality, at least a minimum of 1 bullet and 5 round trips.
Kind of bring it back to reality. This is about CEQA. CEQA is only environmental issues.
Yep.
So the level of service, unless you can, I mean, I can get creative and think of some ways to tie it to environmental issues, but I think the city manager's comment, it's really more of a conversation with them, you know, and basically it's to mitigate some of these other impacts, you got to give us something, and there's where I think the conversation takes place, as opposed to putting something in the letter that says your environmental comment is inadequate, because I'm not sure what you would then say, because you could make the argument that more service could even raise more noise, more parking, things like that. It's kind of I mean, we'd be willing to live with that, but that's not the environmental issue that's supposed to be in their pocket before they make their decision.
Okay, but this letter, the time frame for objecting to the EIR is now passed.
Correct.
So this letter is just advisory.
This letter puts them on record of what our complaints still are. And quite frankly, it's very common to do this prefatory to a lawsuit.
And if I hear you, and if I read this letter, there are 3 items that we're emphasizing to them. One is that we want the center pole alignment rather than the poles down the edge, which will more adversely impact the trees. 2 is that we want the quad gates at Watkins, which clearly will address a noise issue and will also address a safety issue at Watkins. And 3rd, we want service, which isn't specified in the letter. And I agree that's more of a conversation, but I think we can request that. Whether we want to be specific about how many trains we want stopping in Atherton, I'm not sure about.
Perhaps the statement could be and should be, in context with what they're saying, is thank you for 1 trip a day possible. That's not enough. So I think because what we're really saying is your response to us in terms of the final EIR responded to all of our comments. It's inadequate, it's inappropriate, and not enough.
So the minimum service level commitment is insufficient.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't it be reasonable, I mean, I'm sorry, and it's kind of like the devil's advocate, good or bad or indifferent. We want to know the level of service to know that if in fact there will be a greater negative effect of more trains or more standing trains. So isn't that kind of along the same, may not be good, we may not want more service, we find out the noise is greater, but you're not telling us, so how can we even consider it?
I think they've told us one.
Well, but they've also said that they're going to extend our service. What are you going to extend our service to? We'd like to know, because that impact we should have considered when you're doing this, because my neighbors don't like it if you're going to give me 20 trains a day. Boom. So we don't even have that factor to consider because you're not telling us.
We're going to have the number of trains,
there's not going to be an extra.
It's whether they stop.
That's all it's going to do is they're every half hour stop. One of them or two of them will stop.
Absolutely, but if we knew that there were more trains that stopped, we'd know what the greater impact of a standing train is. But I'm sure that Paul would say their standing train makes more noise. Who knows? I've never had an electric train in front of my house. But I think that would be a way to try to cough that information out.
But I don't know, where did we get the idea that it was only one train a day back and forth, right?
They've had it in
Yes.
presentations.
Yeah.
I've seen it in presentations
Yeah.
at the MTC.
Minimum service level, which is one train each way a day.
Yeah,
Yes,
I've
sir.
seen.
A couple of points. The Caltrain emasculated the intra-peninsula service when they put in the baby bullets. If you try to go from Menlo Park to Burlingame between the hours of 7 and 9, it's virtually impossible because you don't find a train that makes all those stops. The schedule is a very complex thing. They have their string diagrams, which make pretty pictures if you don't try and get any information out of them. And in those, they illustrated this one train in the morning and one train in the afternoon. That's included in the environmental report. But for us to come out and say we want so many trains, I don't think we're in a position. I think council's advice there is very good because we want adequate service, but we don't want to define it at this point.
So did you like what city manager suggested, that the minimum service commitment is insufficient?
That language would suit me as well, yes.
Yeah, I like that language. I would like to raise a separate issue, which is I am very sympathetic to the argument that William Grindley has made regarding the technology solution that they are proposing versus the DMU and EMU solutions. And while we've got language in here, addressing electrification as basically the backdoor to HSR, we haven't really addressed that technology issue. In fact, we've addressed the catenary solution in terms of winding those poles in the middle rather than the side, which I agree with, but it doesn't address the alternative technology, which frankly I don't think they're responsive to. It's been raised, but I'm very sympathetic. I think those arguments are compelling.
Well, we can put that in. 3 years ago, William gave me probably that very same presentation, and I made it up when they had all of us together and at an MTC meeting with Mark Scanlon, and he was just absolutely belligerent. We've heard that that train has left the station. We're not looking at diesel technology. Of course, it was like diesel was bad, and he wasn't even going to listen that there were new technologies with regards to diesel. Now he's gone. There's new people there. I mean, you could put. Well, but there's transitioning. So you need to. I would go ahead and maybe we should add something in there that perhaps more cost-effective solution still hasn't been properly rendered. But
let's use SQL language and say the alternatives of other forms of locomotion, such as diesel or modern diesel, have not been studied adequately
Yeah.
and were just dismissed.
Yes.
I like that. I like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's really good.
So you can add that to your letter.
That's reasonable.
You got that to your
Yes.
letter?
You type faster than we tell.
Any new alternatives of other forms of locomotion have not been adequately studied and were dismissed.
Right. Okay, so that's our objection.
Okay.
So just to clarify on the very first point that Bill made, that was in response to the staff report. It's not in response to.
Yeah, no, I said
the letter.
the
I know
staff
that
report.
There
Okay.
were some comments that,
That was his letter.
I just want to be clear.
Well, the media attributed to your letter, but that was,
I understand.
that happens sometimes.
I
That was my
always never
comment
call.
in the staff report, by the way, as the council's aware, I forwarded you that press comment that I made earlier.
Yeah,
It was a press conference.
yeah. Okay.
All right, so we're not, gonna do anything with this. at
Well,
this
what is,
point.
so,
It's a recommendation to approve the letter with modifications.
Okay, so I move to, are we gonna do that
Yep.
now? I move to, approve this letter with the modifications that we have been discussed, including the technology solution, level of service, and, yeah.
I will say.
Can we amend to also ask the mayor to get in touch with Palo Alto and,
Well, let's do the letter first and then we'll do that.
I don't think you need to direct the mayor.
Yeah.
all right, okay, fine, no problem.
I think he's got the message.
All right, fine, okay.
Message delivered.
All right,
Good.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
You move things along, it's getting late. It's getting late, you're moving us along. That's good.
I think this might be the longest meeting of the year.
Not a good way to start that.
And it's January.
Well, we didn't start the meeting until after 8 o'clock.
All right, we're moving to item number 17, which is the second reading of the wireless telecommunications.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have before you the staff report. This is the second reading and adoption of the ordinance as amended. Staff also recommends the adoption of an urgency ordinance with findings as stated in the preamble to that ordinance. Urgency ordinance should be adopted first before the second reading and adoption of the other. So staff is here to answer any questions the council might have. Again, we modified at the last meeting with respect to the aesthetics, and you have the paragraph in the staff report as it was modified in the ordinance.
Okay, let's do questions of clarification. I'll have one. If council wishes to increase the proposed minimum from 2,000 to any other number.
The minimum lease amount?
Yes.
You can certainly do so.
All right.
Good idea.
Any other question, clarification? Is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none. Council comment. Gary?
I agree with you, the increase in the lease amount, what we can get, real estate's expensive, so, especially in this town, so I'm in the upper end.
I think we should do the urgency, ordinance first.
Yes, you should, but with respect to that leasing amount, it's just a frame of reference. A single utility pole, one piece of wireless communications equipment off of it, no equipment on the ground, that's a minimum lease amount for the town. If it's a much bigger array on the pole, extraneous equipment in a fenced area, screened area, underground vault, that's gonna be a much bigger lease amount. We would set that amount because it's a negotiated thing and it's a bigger footprint, case by case basis.
And
So the
then
minimum
this
amount
gives the
is something
staff
we're looking at.
flexibility to negotiate above the minimum
Correct.
when there's more than one item.
Our intent was that we have a baseline for, you strip down Volkswagen, and then we move up from there as the site dictates.
And is it accurate that the issue of the lease is separate from the urgency ordinance?
Yes.
And then the second, so can we take care of the second reading and we won't leave this item until we've addressed
First, the urgency ordinance first, but yes.
Say it again?
The urgency ordinance first.
Yeah, that's what Jeff said.
So,
Any comments on the urgency ordinance?
right, we need to adopt the urgency ordinance before we can go on.
Right. I don't hear any comments.
No.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Second. Do we have a
about your increase of the minimum per month. San Carlos has a minimum of what, 4,000 per month in San Carlos?
Yes, and that's for, Robert's got a little more detail on that, but I believe that is not for public right-of-way. That is for like the tower we have behind Town Hall.
Yeah, that's for their actual town, on their town property lease.
Yeah, there's
4,000.
And do you have information on what their lease fee, if any, is for use of right-of-way?
Currently, right now, their only requirement is a permit, a conditional use permit, and an administrator use permit of $2,948. The CUP is $8,174, and there's a $10,000 deposit.
So their lease in the right of way is $2,948.
There is none.
No lease in the right of way.
Only on city-owned property.
And some cities aren't to that level yet, as far as public right of way. Most of them are mostly on the actual property, town property. And
so do we have any information on leases in the right of way?
Some of Los Altos theirs is the same for public and town right away. So, for instance, theirs has a $663 use permit, $1,800 planning commission application, environmental review for $2,206. They have an encroachment permit for $592, and then the building permit component also, which is about 2.5%. And then, it's 5 to 7%. And then there's a planning fee deposit of $16,000.
What's the best apples to apples for this $2,000 a month? Do you have something else that directly compares to that?
Hillsborough would have been almost apples to apples.
Yeah,
And I think we're kind of mimicking them.
Yeah, what's Hillsborough's, Robert?
Hillsborough is just a minimum $10,000 deposit fee for the application, but their rentals from $1,800 to $2,500 and that's on private on their own property.
Town private.
Right. The closest one would probably be Redwood City, which they do a architectural permit, which is $1,000, and then they do a $5,000 deposit, and they do a CUP of $2,800.
$2,800 is a lease?
Is a conditional use permit.
No, he's got Redwood City says for $1,000.
Yeah, there's no. Most of them don't have leases. The only one that was close to it was Los Altos, which currently it's the same for public and private, public and on town right away.
I think what we find is a lot of jurisdictions really do look at this on a case-by-case basis. And for instance, some towns like Hillsborough can have hills. If you can get a site way up on top of the hill that shoots, because it's line of sight, it shoots all over, that's going to be more than $1,500 a month. It's going to be $5,000 a month or more, and they're going to stick a whole bunch of other co-locations on it. And so I think right now you're trying to engineer a fee that I think, quite frankly, it's going to be based on what they want to do. I think the city manager was saying, look, if it's just a skinny pole for my one little antenna, maybe that's one fee. But if they want to put 6 different companies or 4 different companies, and they want to have the big vault next to it, above or below ground, either way, those are going to command more money. And I think that if we try to figure out what those are going to be tonight, we're going to cheat ourselves.
Yeah, but the staff came up with a number that it recommended. So what is the basis? Understood, but it's a number that somebody thought about, came up with. So what is the basis for that?
I'll give you that. It's from Robert's table. The rental fee range. I'm reading that bottom line. These are the lease amounts that these communities may charge for rental of the site. Now, granted, we're ahead of the game because we're looking at charging these for rights of way. Most of these communities' ordinances only address towers on town-owned property.
Right.
So that's what these dollar amounts are for. Redwood City is $1,081 to $2,500 per month. Daly City is $2,500 to $3,500 per month. Town of Hillsborough is $1,836 to $2,554. Burlingame is an average of $2,000 a month. Menlo Park is about $2,800 a month. Los Altos Hills, $2,200 to $2,600 a month, and San Carlos, $4,000 a month. So I tried to pick a number that was less than the $4,000 number, because that's clearly a big tower like we've got out back here on town-owned property, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about singular poles with one array out the side and no equipment. So we tried to pick a number that.
We're talking about little boxes.
A little box, right.
Like you see at Atherton and El Camino, or right on the corner there. They're all over. I think there's 25.
And these are per location. And anytime they come in to make any modification to those whatsoever, they're going to fall under our new ordinance, and it's going to trigger the lease requirements. So we're going to start picking that up over time as they do that, because they come in quite often.
Understand there's a reason for them to want a lease in the right-of-way, because by definition, rights-of-way usually give licenses, and it's by definition revocable at any time. And so if we give them a lease for 10 years, that means they've got 10 years of use that we're stuck with too. Now, I don't consider that to be a problem in Atherton, because we have a general plan that says don't widen the streets, no 3 lanes, no 4 lanes. So that's not a huge problem, but it's one of those where I think it works to their advantage as well as ours. At least that's what we're telling them.
We don't want to be excessively unreasonable.
Well,
exactly.
So that was going to be my question. Is there a threshold where it would be an unreasonable fee that we would not be able to charge? Because bottom line is, I don't kind of want any more of these units all around in our town. And so, you know, if you make the fee excessive, then they won't maybe want to come. But is there a law? Is there a threshold?
That violates the federal law that constrains us. I appreciate that.
But I think what she was asking is actually a little different. I think what you were asking was, we'd like to maximize our revenues without hitting that point where we would be at. And so, what is that point where we're 1 penny below discouraging them and reaching that federal law?
And
how would we know?
It will be unique to each situation, and the way we will know is because there are appraisers out there that do this and will come to us and tell you, this is what you should get for this site right here. And when you have that in your pocket, here's the thing. The law says you cannot unreasonably allow them to put up this facility. Because they say that, now it comes down to what is reasonable. And then we use the reasonable man standard, and we use professionals to go out and tell us what is the value of using that site for 10 years at this location. And so we can't tell you a finite number right now, or a definite number, but we can tell you we think this is a good place to start our negotiations. And when we're talking about, if you're talking about baseline at 2,000, the appraisers are going to take that information and say, well, if that's the baseline, and this is a Cadillac out here, and it's going to take a lot of space, and it's going to serve a lot of different companies locating on it, I think we're going to see a different number.
I don't know.
I would agree with you in the sense that we don't want to be unreasonable, but yet we are Atherton, and frankly, the fee probably based on value of land, site area alone, should represent the upper range. Merely because of that fact, maybe we're setting the goal for everybody to come up to us, but I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think the appraiser might support it.
I think we should be about 80% of the top number, and it's still negotiable from there. So at 80% puts you at the, so push it up, 80% of the 4,000, I think.
I'd rather go high and let them say, look, that's too high, and here's the appraisal.
May I caution you on that? The town of Hillsborough spent an awful lot of money in a lawsuit because they got to be
on a fee schedule.
My understanding is
it
was their whole process and procedure. All they wanted to do was say no, and we cannot go there because, well, we could go there, but I was hired to.
I'm not saying no.
Reduce litigation, and all I'm saying is, I don't think you're being reasonable if you say let's set it at the highest number possible, because we don't know what that number is, and I think based on what we need to base it on appraisals. And yes, we will set it at the highest number possible based on appraisals at the time when we have somebody in front of us.
And as a reminder, our tower out back is 4,000?
It's I think 4,600.
4,600 a month for the tower out back.
When was that negotiated?
The last round of negotiation was probably just about
Well,
4,060.
But that's before we did a survey too.
yeah, and in our contract, it calls for every year it's a 5% increase on the lease.
Yeah, we should be
So,
pulling
I
in
mean, we
30K
could-
on that baby.
I'm fine to use 3,000. I think we shouldn't push it too far. But I have a question, which is, if we're calling this a minimum on a case-by-case basis, could we reduce it? Or are we casting
Well,
a net? And here's my question. If the town decided to participate with the library in deploying a fiber network, and we needed certain, places where those wires could be spliced, would we be setting ourselves up where we have to pay ourselves $2,000 or $3,000 a month?
not really, because there's very clever ways of defining the public need necessity sometimes comes in as an offset for them. And so we say, look, if you do this, we'll give you credit for $2,000 a month if we can use your pole. Now, that still doesn't change the minimum because that is a credit to their fee. And so using
So
your
we have
example.
flexibility in our own fiber network.
Well, and
But that's not a
these
conversation
fees-
we wanna
These
close.
fees are set by resolution.
I understand.
These fees are set by resolution, and that can be changed.
I just don't want to trap ourselves, that's all.
We leave a door open by having a clause added to the agreement. Town has the right to. So it's an agreement.
Yeah, it's a lease agreement, which comes before the council.
So they agree to it. Here's the fee, subject to, if we do have expandability, that the town has the right.
Right, but be aware, this is not
may
just
never.
for poles, this is also for the boxes.
If they don't want to agree to it, then they don't have to be here.
Yeah, I like the San Carlos number, be closer to San Carlos. It doesn't have to equal their number. I think, as opposed to 30,000 or 3,000. Mr. Mayor, I would probably go 80% of the 4,000, raise it up to 3,200 at least, if not 3,500. So I mean, people they want to have access here because they're high bandwidth users here in Atherton, unlike in some of the other communities. And I agree with the vice mayor. We don't want to have it where they just willy-nilly, we're just going to go add some towers here. We already.
With this in place, there will be no willy and there will be no nilly.
I know that.
This is the first time we've ever had a cogent policy that they now have to live with. And by the way, my understanding is they're kind of lined up at the door.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, our lease is $4,069.47 per month with AT&T, and that increases 5% every year in our contract. So, and if you look at all the cities, us and San Carlos are the highest right now.
And we want to be there. All right. All right.
200 sounds reasonable.
Do we need a motion on that?
No, that's just the direction the staff in terms of moving forward, but you do need second reading and adoption of the second ordinance.
We just read the title. Just read the title and waive the full reading.
Yeah, you did that the first time.
Okay, so,
I just have one other question. So what happens after 10 years? If we give them a 10-year lease, what happens after 10 years?
Come back to the table.
Starts again.
Okay. And as it is now, they're at will?
They have no lease.
We're not sure.
So we could go back to them.
is it only if they change, only if they come in for an improvement? At 10%, I think, is that the rule?
Well, any
More than 10%.
modification that triggers the ordinance. The 10% makes it, they have to go full boat and do aesthetics and all kinds of other changes. But they could come in and do a minor modification, less than 10%. It would still trigger the ordinance, still trigger the lease requirement, even though it's just a box change out.
Correct.
So that would trigger the lease fee?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think I haven't talked to Jen yet about this, but my theory is that it's like billboards, but in reverse. You can have a reverse amortization, and I believe that we can go back to them and say, if you did it today, the most you could get was 10 years. So therefore, we're putting you on notice that as of today, we have a new ordinance in place, and because you beat the clock and you don't have to pay anything, you have 10 years in which to continue to sit there without paying a fee. But at the end of 10 years, we are hereby saying that we're giving you basically an extension, a permit for free for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, you have to come in like everybody else and renegotiate your use of that property. And I don't know how they can contest that, because what they've been given is something far more valuable than everybody else, but at the same time, they get to amortize whatever they put there without us being told we're committing a regulatory taking.
So
Can we make
why,
that a 5-year
I
notice?
was just going to say,
Well, I'm only using
why is the
because-
magic 10 years? Why
Because
is it-
that's the least term that we're giving everybody else.
But
Well, why is it?
why not give them the
But
7-year term?
Otherwise, you're going to argue we have a right to squat here forever until we make one of these changes. And it could be 20 or 30 or 40 years.
Okay, that's a policy issue, it's not part of the ordinance.
That's correct. We'll come back and
We
talk
should
about
come back and address that.
Yeah.
So, Councilman Ruiz,
Yes, I'll make the motion.
this is to approve the second reading of the ordinance.
That's simple.
Second.
I'll second it.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Next item is item 18, police motorcycle purchase.
Mayor, members of the council, you have a staff report before you tonight requesting authorization to purchase one new 2015 BMW motorcycle as a replacement motorcycle for an older BMW at a total cost of $34,591.22. This price includes sales tax, documentation fees, communication equipment, radar unit, and installation costs. The total cost represents a maximum amount, as the labor cost could be less. Atherton experiences traffic and pedestrian safety concerns every day, whether the need is to stop sign enforcement near one of our elementary schools, traffic issues along El Camino Real, or speed enforcement on cut-through traffic and streets throughout Atherton. The police department receives regular traffic complaints, sometimes simultaneously, and at multiple locations throughout the town. Motorcycle traffic enforcement is one of the most effective means to address these types of concerns and citizens' complaints. The general life expectancy of a police motorcycle is approximately 4 years, and depending on its use, 40,000 to 60,000 miles. The motorcycle that's being replaced is 12 years old, almost 3 times the industry standard. During City Council's May 2013 Goals and Principles Priorities Workshop, vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian safety emerged as one of the town's top priorities. The BMW motorcycle and an additional full-time motor officer will significantly enhance the police department's overall traffic enforcement and collision reduction efforts. During the 2014-2015, officers received some 30 citizen complaints regarding traffic problems, issued more than 9,000 traffic citations, and investigated 245 traffic collisions, resulting in 83 injuries, 3 fatalities, and untold property damage, not counting unreported traffic collisions where the involved parties exchanged information in lieu of a collision report. Are there any questions?
Question, clarification.
Yeah, the $7,371.85 for equipping the motorcycle. Since we just recently disposed of a motorcycle, couldn't we, or can't we use that salvaged equipment?
No, we evaluated that, and with the communication problems we were having with the bike, and considering that equipment was 13 years old, it's not something that I would recommend putting on a brand new motorcycle. Plus, you're going to pay to have it removed off the old bike, if it's even serviceable, and then have it paid to reinstalled on a new bike. If the bike was newer, I think it would have been a more viable option. You and I've talked about that before, but I think in this case, given the bike's pushing 13 years age, I just don't think that's a wise investment of our time and money.
But don't they, when you have the bike certified or maintained, don't they also do upgrades on your equipment on a regular basis, an annual basis?
Only if it's not functional or broken and it can't be repaired.
What about when we had the budget in for changing the technology, the radio technology? Did we ever implement that?
I think we did some of that, but it was put on hold because of countywide communications issues. Remember that discussion?
Right, I remember that.
Yeah.
But I thought it was into last year. But okay, if you didn't upgrade, then you wouldn't have upgraded that 2002 bike.
No, and I think those were mainly the cars and the portables we were looking at the time.
All right, thank you.
Other questions or clarification?
How many miles does the old bike have on it?
I think it's about 30,000 on the older BMW. I think the Honda's sitting at around 23,000. But, you know, geographically, we don't have the larger area, so we'd expect lower mileage. And that's why we push the years out, although I think 12 is a little excessive. But that has been, that BMW has, the older 2002 model, has not only been in our rotation. Occasionally, like when we have the STEP program, we'll have 3 people riding. And one of those people would be our traffic sergeant, Sergeant Kokler.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but this bike's going to be replaced, so this will be used as a training bike or third bike potentially?
No.
No, this one's going, we're getting rid of it. Period.
Yeah, we're getting rid of it. It's just unserviceable.
So we're keeping the Honda for...
Well, we're keeping the Honda. The interesting thing about the Honda was bought through a grant through OTS, and we're researching what OTS would like us to do with it. What we can't sell at our auction, we know that it's in the agreement. So we use it minimally, you know, for training and other purposes, but not as a full service bike for going out there and enforcing traffic. It's too old and minimally maintained.
So obviously with the equipment on it, meaning we don't want to damage a new bike's equipment if we're training a new officer how to ride. I remember when I first started riding. Never dropped my bike, but I'd imagine dropping your bike is probably part of the practice and learning how to do the tight turns and so on and so forth. So I imagine having a bike that doesn't have a lot of value to it, keeping it around is worthwhile for us.
It's not a bad idea.
I have a question. I assume that the cost will come out of the vehicle replacement fund, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
And this is not in the budget, is that right?
No, the bike is not in the current budget, but generally vehicles are not in the budget. The vehicle replacement fund is for both planned and unplanned vehicles.
We have sufficient funds in that account.
Now, just as to that, is there a vehicle replacement or fleet policy where you just count, we're budgeted to replace, you know, cars every 4 years or motorcycles?
We try to, what we do is we budget through the budget cycle every year, and we charge to each department specifically based off of the usage of vehicles, an amount to each department into the equipment replacement fund for future purchases. And so we do that on a charge basis, and usually it's the PD and Public Works that get the charges. Like Public Works, for instance, will get a charge to its department for replacement of generators, tractors, and the same thing we do for the police department and vehicles. So we set a rate that we charge to each department, and we put it into this equipment replacement fund for purchases down the road. We have those funds, or
that is part of the budget.
Right.
Right. Now, again, that's not a regular.
Yeah, we continue to do that, and then there's cases where we go into a budget year and we realize, okay, we need to purchase a vehicle, and we'll go ahead and budget an amount in there. You know, if there's something that comes up, instead of one vehicle, we have to purchase 2. We put that in the budget, but we do charge every year an amount to build up this equipment replacement fund for emergency purposes.
Is there an urgency to this?
Yeah, in a sense, because the older BMW just got to the point where we couldn't put it back together without significant expenditures on it. Just cost-benefit analysis wasn't there. We use that bike rotating amongst the other 2. We occasionally will have 3 people fielded, but we are looking at hiring a fully trained, certified motor officer that's also a motor trainer. And we plan on using the motorcycles more frequently across the week, dealing with the traffic, schools, and the complaints that we get about traffic issues.
More of a traffic sensitive.
Well, one of the
Traffic focused.
yeah, one of the problems that our officers have, particularly the ones assigned to cars, is during the week, particularly during the commute hours, you can't get anywhere, and the bikes have that ability to split traffic and get to traffic collision scenes and render aid or clear the traffic in a much quicker response time.
So this is for one of the officers that's coming in was one of the officers that we had in the budget, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so when we made the budget, we also, and actually I think you said, hey, I don't need any new cars, no new vehicles at the time you did the budget, but you knew you were going to hopefully be bringing in a new officer. So at that time, we thought we had the vehicles that we needed for the officers. I realize you've got a different mix now, but maybe we have one too many cars now. But I think that, you know, to the vice mayor's comment, it seems like, again, you know, maybe it's fortuitous that we happy to hire a motor officer, and as you said, that they are more agile. So, you know, I cannot argue with that from that perspective, but you know, we knew we were hiring an officer. It's similar to the code compliance officer and the arborist in some sense, is that we knew we wanted to hire people, and when we did analysis and we said we don't need any more vehicles, and suddenly we do need vehicles, and so it's no, well, it's.
But as I understand it, what this will enable is 3 fully functional motorcycles.
For the two motor officers that we have.
2 motor officers, and you need.
Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're hiring a police officer. It just happens that he has the expertise to ride a motor. It doesn't mean he's guaranteed to ride the motor, but yet if we have the ability to have another motor officer based on your discretion on the shift, you'll at least have a motorcycle to put him on, but normally he'd be in the car that we purchased, correct?
Absolutely, and it's important to remember that the motorcycle, when we had that conversation, council member, was meeting our needs and working properly, and you know, I have no, and that's why we do have the emergency vehicle replacement fund, because we have, I mean, an officer can get in a collision in a squad car, and that car is no longer serviceable. We need to be able to work, and we need, and this traffic is a big issue for us. So that not only was the bike being rotated into that priority. Occasionally, it was used by Officer Kokler, which was our 3rd officer. Now we're hiring another officer, who, by the way, is not physically here yet. And when he gets here, he won't be on the bike for a while. So we're going to be pushed right up to this next budget cycle by the time there's an incentive for riding the motorcycle. And if there is anything before that, we have the funds in the police budget, considering it's not a lot of money to deal with that if we're going to put that 3rd officer up on the bike. But I think the benefit is that sometimes we don't even have 2 officers across the week. Now that we have 3, and those 2 officers were added by, you know, this council here, that is a excellent way to use somebody that comes fully trained, that won't be dropping the bike in training, and is literally going to be a high producer of citations out there.
So, a question just for me, going back to fleet management. So when did we get rid of the 2002 bike? That's gone, right? So this is not, we're not rotating, this is not an immediate replacement. We sold off or we auctioned off.
It's not gone yet. We tried to do the open market auction that councilman, yeah.
We actually have a policy, we try to sell it.
Yeah.
Apparently that didn't go very well.
Well, you never know.
Well, it was sent, you're right, it says was sent to auction. It doesn't say it was sold.
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much that's what we tried to.
Okay.
to capitalize on it. But
And then where I was going, that I'm sorry, is
Well-
12 years. And if we have a fleet management policy, you'd think that by we would have written that bike off before now. 12 years is pretty old for a bike operation.
yeah, I know that it's a small department in a small town, and George is educating me on the ways of the small town. But I got to tell you, as a chief, and I've been a chief for 12 years, and 3 other agencies, and those other 3 agencies, I never even heard of anything like this. Car goes down, send the plan, budgeted for, 1-page document, get a car. Santa Rosa, where we had 175 officers, that place would come to a screeching halt if we had to go to this amount of work to get vehicles replaced. I mean, we just couldn't operate.
Welcome to the small town.
Yeah. Thank you, city manager.
We really appreciate you being
Well, we've definitely upgraded our.
If you're not going to
Yeah.
answer our questions, then why are you even sitting here? I mean, this is the thing. We have to make it worthwhile for you to stay.
Rest assured, though, that I'm not going to recommend a purchase that I don't think we need, or is not going to enhance the goals of the council and the department.
I'll write that down.
And
Let me just take a moment to see if there is any public comment. Okay, hearing no public comment.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Unless there's any further comments. I mean, I would like to actually make one comment, and I do think that motorcycle related, that with the advancement, it is something that transportation, and this is the big thing that we're having to deal with. So this actually will probably give us a little bit of an opportunity to be a little bit ahead, because I think with all the growth going on north to south of us, this is going to be one of our instant ways to be effective to try to reduce traffic impacts that we have as a town versus trying to change roadways, signage, et cetera. We'll have the ability to do enforcement to have a direct response to residents' complaints. So I am a supporter of the motorcycle. I'm also a supporter of advanced training for motor officers. So I'll make the motion to ride this bike.
Seconded.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I will reluctantly vote for it.
Another unanimous
Thanks,
vote.
Chief.
Okay.
Next time, look for an electric one.
I'm going to write that down.
a moped.
By the way,
Moped.
Okay,
But-
we've got 3 more items. We were gonna try to get out of here by 10. We will not make it, but we'll be out of here by 10:30. The next item is item number 19, which is the city council committee assignments. And you can see them all here. I just want to make a couple comments. One is that I took under advisement everyone's request, and except for, I believe, of those that I could make, of one item where I had 4 requests for 2 positions, which was the Surveyor Committee, I was able to give everybody what they wanted. There are sort of 2 little qualifying issues. Everyone's gotten a letter from Mr. Burt, and I subsequently followed up with Carrie on the Peninsula Cities Consortium. It sounds like that may not be around for long. Do you want to make a comment about that, Carrie?
PCC, it's the same players have been in the game. So when you hear Palo Alto and Atherton have been your main players in the game. But with the changes that have been going on throughout the peninsula, there hasn't been a participation level that is acceptable to actually get a quorum. We've been fighting literally for the last 8 months to try to establish a quorum. So I mentioned to the mayor that if in fact Palo Alto can't get any other participants, they've inquired out there that there isn't much value to being part of something that frankly, doesn't have the attendance level to accomplish anything. So I mentioned to the mayor once the results come back from Palo Alto's query that, we're pretty much an inactive group. So that'll be something that I think will officially come out as a response if in fact to leave the PCC group.
I also think that if whoever did the tallying in the primary, secondary assignments box needs to learn to tally properly. Because the numbers don't add up.
That had nothing to do with PCC. But it
No.
Well, we'll take that under advisement, but just be aware that there are several committees where there's two for each committee.
Well, if you,
So they count for two. They're not secondary. You can't see that from this, but the alternates are all in the top item, and in the in the regional assignments and in the Atherton committee assignments, except there's two Atherton committees where there's two primaries. There's not really an alternate.
okay.
So that doesn't say that the count was correct. But
All right, okay, no problem. Anyway, I thought that you did a good job laying them out.
The other thing I
Thank
wanted to say was on the city charter discussion committee. I know we're going to address that in a study group at February 4th. So the duration of that committee, we'll discuss that. We'll see where that goes. Okay. Let's go back now to item 11. We pulled the consent calendar. This is the item for the RFP for the bike groups.
All right, staff's here to answer any questions the council might have. This item was on consent, so there's no staff report beyond what you have in front of you.
I think I pulled it. I just wanted to say that I thought staff did a great job putting the staff report together. I appreciate that the request for bid documents for the Class 3 bike routes, which would allow for rapid installation, and hopefully that would be completed before the beginning of the next school year, September 2015, June 16. But to clarify that the request for the bid documents is a reference to only the Class 3 suggested routes, or is it for all of the Class 1 and Class 2 suggested routes?
It's only for the Class 3. The reason being for Class 3 is pretty much just signage and some, pavement markings. The Class 2s and 3s requires possibly widening existing pavement, and anyway, it requires more. I'm sorry, Class 1 and 2. It takes more of an engineering analysis, and that's really what we're asking for here, for them to do a feasibility and to identify areas where we currently do not have the width of the pavement or width of the area for the Class 1s. And so that's really the purpose of this, is to identify that.
And then on page 3 of the RFP, where it, actually it's page 5 of the whole document, under background, where it lists all of the routes that we've selected. The first one, talking about Middlefield Road, it's really the last line of that section, where it continues on improvements at Oak Grove Avenue and consideration of green lanes on all of the Class 3 lanes. Green lanes, is that a typo? Because I'm thinking it should be Class 2.
You are correct.
Okay.
Yes, I apologize. We will make that correction before we send it out.
I was just trying. So we're thinking that Class 2 dedicated paths along its entire length, plus a Class 1 separate offer of two-way path from Watkins to Marsh. Okay, so that has nothing to do with Class 3. That
No,
whole
it doesn't.
section there. Okay. And I guess since funding for the more expensive Class 1 and Class 2 bike lanes is critical, I just want to make sure that in this RFP we are asking the consultants to assist in finding grant funds wherever possible. Is that something we can ask them to do?
Well, we can. However, as far as the grants, I mean, that's something that staff is always monitoring. The type of consultant that will probably be responding to this are more design-related type consultants. But but as always, we kind of cast the net pretty broadly, and we can certainly ask them to provide that.
Mike, look at the bottom of page 5. because the RFP, it does talk about funding
that pretty
assistance. Is
clear?
that
Oh.
what we're, do we tighten that up any?
Well, yeah, that's where we talked about asking the consultant to help us specifically with Selby Lane, that we were doing the analysis and the design on Selby Lane in the hopes that we would get some grants because it was a border city and it had the economic situation with the people that would be using that, as well as the joint jurisdictional issues that they were looking for, and that this would be, they were going to give us something that we could use to turn into a proposal or send out for, you know, for grants.
Correct.
And Middlefield, because Middlefield going.
Well, we but if I remember right from the discussions, Selby Lane wasn't high on all the priority lists. In fact, it was low on the list, but we brought it onto the list because we thought we might get fully funded for that, and it was the one that would fit into the categories, and that's how Selby Lane made this list.
Right. And so I was mistaken. And actually this is for all the class, you know, ones and twos. So, because all these funding opportunities, you know, we're always going to identify the most competitive project. So.
Yeah. And then the other thing I keep bringing up is I hear all this money being given to cities when they have a PDA or a PCA, you know, a priority development area or a priority conservation area, right? And I think that in regards to our potential of making a bike path over the channel in a conservation manner, or that I think we should look at the priority conservation area process. So.
I could certainly have planning staff put together a summary of what the criteria is to establish a PCA, how the town would do that, and what potential PCAs there are in town.
Does that have anything to do with this RFP?
No.
Well, I think that
There's funding opportunities for PCAs
for
that could-
bike paths and pedestrian
The question
paths.
is, do you want to insert something have staff insert something in the RFP to explore that?
No, that's not related to the RFP.
Because if it's not, we can't talk about it tonight.
Yeah, we could have had a box culvert. That would have done it. But that's okay. It's a different subject.
Well, maybe we can talk about that later.
Sure.
But I think it does relate to bike paths, pedestrian paths, because I know that there's funding for that if it's a priority conservation.
We'll provide something for council information.
I'm not trying to be the stick in the mud, but we are talking about the RFP for design services, and if you want to have them design something, then we can talk about it.
But the RFP does refer to funding opportunities for all improvements, so I think we should
But
start
only
with
for the ones
those.
you're designing, that's the key.
It would be all improvements first.
No, it's five.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
the five.
Staff can provide something for council
So
information.
I want to ask a question about that. Mike, we've identified the 5 priorities here in the background. Are you treating those as all equal, or are you treating those in order of priority?
At this point, we're not treating, all this is doing is really identifying what needs to be done in order to implement these priorities and get costs. And so once we get that, then we'll be coming back to council once we have better defined costs and what type of barriers are, you know, associated with each one of these to actually prioritize.
So for purposes of the RFP, they're all going to be treated as equal, they'll all be addressed, and then if we wish to prioritize them in this order or in some other order, we can deal with that at that time.
That's correct.
But the bids are going to come in per route. Is that correct?
No.
So it's going to be one call to do all this on this phase. It's going to, for all 5 streets or all 5 locations. It's this. How will we be able to segment those for purposes of doing a bid for, say, Middlefield, or a bid for?
Well, we're not doing a bid. Or
Eventually, this is downstream.
Proposals for the design.
Okay.
This is just
And
the
then once you have a design,
Right.
you can segment it any way you've got the money to show them.
as a for instance, let's say your number one priority had a whole bunch of barriers requiring right of way, or, you know, there was, you know, something that the roadway needed to be widened. And you might decide, well, priority number 2, which would be very easy to implement, we can do it quicker. You may decide to, even though it's priority number 2, to fund that one first. So all this is really to provide the council better information on what design constraints are out there and a more refined cost estimate for each one of these.
So that's I think Bill's point, that you'll get a cost estimate for each of them.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping.
Yes.
Your answer was going to be.
Is there any
Okay,
other?
that's all.
Can I get a motion? Do we need a motion?
Yes.
To approve the RFP?
So moved. With the,
Yes.
With the contract gone.
with the contract on,
Any other amendment?
Yes. Class 3 and class 2.
plus
Oh,
change.
that's true. Second. Right, correct. Second. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Okay,
It's unanimous.
good.
We're running for a unanimous record here. Okay. Item 13. This is a resolution authorizing destruction of records pursuant to Government Code Section 34090.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have the city attorney and the police chief who have called through these records and provided the staff report to you this evening. They're happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Since I asked for it to be pulled, I have a question,
Yes.
obviously. Obviously, in some of the records, pertain to people who applied, and we chose not to accept them. There's not a question there. But on the two files, one internal affairs and one citizen complaint, are those for employees, or do they relate to employees who are still on the payroll?
Yes.
Yes, but they do not relate to any substantive claims of
Well, I don't know.
cheating, stealing, or any of those things.
Not,
Nor are any of those people looking at future discipline or have anything else in the record where this needs to stay around. In fact, I know that this continues with some people in the community to be an issue. Now, let me give you a little facts. I believe trust but verify. So here's your verification. I've been here 3 years. During that time, our officers have had 70,275 contacts with the community and other citizens.
Wow.
Of that 70,000, they were for calls for service, officer-initiated incidents, traffic stops, 12,729 citations for moving violations, another 6,000 warning citations, 720 felony and misdemeanor arrests. How many citizens' complaints do you think we had during that time?
Well, you have an unfair advantage.
Probably one, the one that's on this list.
No, he's
Oh.
not on that list.
Oh,
We've had one that was sustained, the officer was dealt with, he's no longer with the department. That is an extraordinary record for the people that you have here for 3 years. So that just gives you an idea how old some of that, these records. And, this is a routine process in government, particularly in police agencies. Everywhere I work, this is very routine. Your city attorney really scrutinizes this stuff. He asks questions, he looks at it, we kick it back and forth, and we don't bring them all forward to the council for destruction. But when we,
These are 5 years old at a minimum, despite the fact that a lot, other than the police department, the records aren't required to be maintained for 5 years. Most of them are 2 or 3 years. But we keep everything for 5 years, and then we bring them to you only after we have determined that they are truly routine. I call them garbage. This is housekeeping. We're throwing out the trash. Quite frankly, the question was asked of me by a citizen: do the chief and I ever reject records that have that 5-year deadline reached? Absolutely. In this cycle, there were 4 that were proposed. 1 was kicked back. The last time, at one point in time, there were 8 records that were proposed, and 3 or 4 of them were kicked back, just because there still was value in maintaining them from a law enforcement perspective, a personnel perspective, or even from a liability perspective. And for the same reason, personnel complaints of the police department specifically have to be maintained for 5 years. There are really strong reasons not to save them beyond that in terms of liability. We talked about this before. We don't have that kind of complaint here tonight. These are, it's almost silly that we're even talking about them. The problem is because they're in somebody's personnel file, I can't tell you what's in them. All I can tell you is there's nothing of substance here. I think the chief could verify that.
Any public comments?
I have two questions. One is the staff report refers to Penal Code 832.5 that says that these personnel records have to be maintained for 5 years.
Yes.
Am I wrong in understanding we have a policy which says that once they have been reviewed, if they're 5 years old, by the chief and by the city attorney, that they actually have to be removed?
No, they do not have to be removed. That is not correct. If we review them and believe there is some value to the organization to keep them, then we will keep them. But here's...
But if you review them and determine there isn't, then they have to be removed. Is that correct?
Well, it is a very good policy to remove them.
But we have implemented that policy.
Not exactly, but yet we try to. Most jurisdictions, the police department's on a calendar. Every month, you'll see in bigger, even Monterey, almost every month there was records destruction. It's a very common thing. And by the way, the city clerk, this is every department, not the police department. So the city clerk we talked today, she's getting ready to bring to you another batch of records from her department. And the government code section that we cite in here talks about each department has the ability to bring these forward and have them destroyed. And that's based on their needs as well.
Okay, second question of clarification. In the staff report it says, in addition, the police department's asking for the approval to destroy 2011 and 2012 citations. And I won't go on and read it, but are these, this is partly background checks, or maybe it's entirely background checks for candidates for the force that we decided not to hire. Is that correct?
Well, did you say citations? Because there's some.
That's what it says.
Yeah, there's some old those are old traffic citations that are no longer needed. The people, quite frankly, the bulk of them don't even work for the department anymore. We are going to be looking at other technology, e-ticket, in the future to look at that. But because files take up room, and after a while they need to be destroyed.
So there's 11, 12 citations, and then 3
citations are traffic citations.
Yeah,
and
traffic.
there's 3 partial background checks.
I'll ask a question. Yeah, I had asked it earlier, but I'd like to get it on the record. I guess there's a reference here that Government Code Section 3490 requires that we be acting pursuant to an adopted records retention policy, and I just want to confirm that we have a records retention policy that we are following.
The city council has created a policy that records will be eligible for destruction at 5 years, even if the retention by statute is 2, 3, or 4 years. So that, in my understanding, that was the policy that this council made last year or the year before. Teresa, you?
2009.
So that's a written policy.
Yeah, it is a written policy.
So short answer is yes.
Is there any other questions or clarification?
I'm good.
Is there any public comment on this issue? Okay. So, any comments?
Yeah, I have a
I'll make a
comment.
motion.
I have a comment, please. In 2012, I guess, Chief, when you first were on board, that was the first time that, 11, but then in 2012 is the first time I can remember that we actually brought police records forward. And it brought up the concept of, if the people are still on, and it was a unanimous council decision, if people are still on the payroll, that it would be prudent to really not destroy those records. If they were no longer on the payroll, and I think at that time we even talked about and had left the employ of the city for a year, then more than a year, then we could destroy those. And I still think that that's a good policy. Look, if somebody's been exonerated, Somebody made a complaint about somebody, and there was through their personal, their body cam, you verify that it wasn't right. I mean, that information should go into their personnel file as well. But just because it's there, I mean, the point that we brought up at that time was that, maybe they did get exonerated, but maybe there'd be a pattern that would be developed, etc. So keeping things in a personnel file for a longer period of time, and it says for a period of at least 5 years, not exactly 5 years. And since we had already discussed this once, and it was a unanimous decision, I really think that if the people are still here, it's prudent for us to keep them. Now, Bill and George, I heard you, but I don't fully understand the liability issue, and perhaps you can change my mind with a further discussion sometime.
A hypothetical that explains how cities get trapped in this illogic. We're required to keep them for 5 years because of 832.5, which was put in place so that when police officers, and only police officers, no other employees, are alleged to have done something while on duty that exceeded their authority or was violated a policy, citizens could come in and make a complaint that had to be investigated, and the department has to have a policy and respond. So let's say there's a traffic situation. Let's use a real situation that's hypothetical, sort of. Police officer driving in one direction, radar, somebody going the other, pulls around behind them, stops them, and the next day, and writes them a ticket for speeding. The next day, the person comes in and writes a complaint. And the complaint says, the police officer had somebody right in front of him, so they couldn't have radared me, and when the police officer turned around and came back, he was incredibly rude and insensitive. First of all, there was nobody in front of him because the dash cam showed there was nobody for at least a half a mile. Secondly, when the person came around, his view thing, their
V-view.
Thank you, the V-view, indicated his entire conversation. It was yes ma'am, no ma'am, thank you very much, I'm sorry you were speeding, I radared you, and everything couldn't have been more cordial. So that was found to be absolutely unfounded and just an illogical complaint. However, let's assume, change that fact slightly. Let's assume that that's a Hispanic female. And then 5 years later, 10 years later down the line, this is still in the guy's file, and somebody files a lawsuit alleging racial discrimination. Well, there wasn't any. It was proven beyond a reasonable doubt there was nothing there. But that's still in his file. Now, 10 years from now, how stale is that information? Who even remembers what it was about? The problem is that's going to be sitting there, and instead of an easy A-bag resolution to this thing of, look, there's nothing there, and the lawyer spends $10,000 getting us kicked out of the suit. Now it's going to be $20,000 because there's going to be, we have to go back and prove a negative, and that is this didn't occur. And so the ViView camera, that will be gone. It'll just be this allegation that was made that was unfounded, and now it's in his or her personnel file. There's no reason for it to be there, and all that is, it's like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And by the way, you're absolutely correct. It was the city council said, well, if it's in their file, then we should keep it. That was over the objection of the then city manager and the city attorney saying that is absolutely not what any other agency we're aware of does because of this possibility for liability. If you go to ABAG and ask them what they recommend, they will tell you right up front, at 5 years, routinely purge your files and cleanse them, but keep the stuff that's relevant that could show that history. And if there's no history in 5 years, that's so stale that I don't know that you could call that a pattern. So that's why we feel strongly about it and recommend this way. There will be times when we come to you and say, look, we have 6 things to well, not now because the chief has got them down to almost no complaints. But if we bring you a complaint, we may say, by the way, there were 3 or 4 that we looked at and we didn't bring to you because we kept them. And that is something that we are not afraid to do and we're looking at all the time. But these are good examples of ones that are just absolutely irrelevant.
Well, the issue is that it's quote unquote a three-step process. The chief, then you, and then it comes to the council, but the council doesn't have the information, and I'm not saying we should, but we don't have the information to really say, you know, just like the trust but verify, just Mr. Dobby's comment. But, you know, we don't,
we have to rely on
yeah. And so, but general practice, at least in private industry, is it's kept in there. And yes, indeed, you may not have the video evidence anymore because they go through a retention policy, et cetera. But it would have a note in there that says that it was reviewed and it was closed out. It was actually
in the rest of public sector. My records aren't public. I have a privacy right in the Constitution, as do all of you, as do all of the other employees except for police officers. And the only reason that they don't have a privacy right is because what they do could impact the rights of a criminal to have a fair trial. That's the only reason we have 832.5 in the penal code as a requirement. And that is so that if somebody needs to find out if they do have a history, they file something called a Pitchess motion, and those motions search into the officer's file to see if there is a history. The statute is Evidence Code Section 1043, and it even says you can only use records that are 5 years old or less, because anything beyond that is stale and doesn't indicate a pattern, which is what you're looking for to show. So, I mean, the legislature looked at this, and they thought that 5 years was the maximum, and we do that for even other records, such as these background investigations and stuff.
So, yeah, thank you very much. You know, I want to make a comment, and I know that we've all received emails related to contact, related to things that have happened in town in the past and historic issues and what's going across the nation. And the reality is we have two people with an incredible amount of integrity that we have hired. The town manager has hired Chief Ed Flynn, and we have the utmost amount of integrity. You are the block. We have a city attorney that's walled out from him, and he is another set of eyes that is not working for the police department. He works for us, and he is our eyes, in essence, in a legal manner on this particular situation related to a policy. If we can't trust the two people we have in this room to make a decision related to retention, exposure, liability, valid or not valid, then these two people here should be replaced. But I think you heard the chief say simply, if we had a problem, he's no longer here. And that's exactly why we've replaced them. We have some changes that have occurred, and this chief of police has set a standard that these people are working by. If we cannot do a simple manner here by getting rid of things that we have two very trusted people within this town have said, we trust that this information is true and valid, and that we're okay to destroy this as far as our policy, then we've got a problem. Now, I cannot see one reason why we don't implement what our policy states. And the chief, if he had a problem, the person wouldn't be in this department in the first place. And if we had a problem with the city attorney, he wouldn't be sitting there. So I'm just, I mean, I get what's going on across the nation. We're here in Atherton. We've hired this. We've changed a lot of things that we've done. A lot of things, what people hear in the newspaper or what people hear from somebody else, that information isn't true often. And same thing related to citizen complaints. They have a right. The person that files the complaint has a right to file a complaint. So I think that this is just one of those things that, you know, we have to do and trust that the people that we've hired, and if we haven't hired the right people, then we're in the wrong. So, you know, but I believe the people we have here, frankly, hold a standard. So.
That's good. I think it's good that we bared this issue out.
Yeah.
Any other comments? And do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion that we adopt the attached resolution authorizing the destruction of certain records pursuant to the Government Code Section 34090 as laid out in the staff report.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm going to oppose. I'd like to spend more time talking to the city manager and the city attorney on it so that I don't have this
conundrum again, but I'd like to also do some additional investigation. It's not a question of my distrust. It's just a question of, you know, what I think should be the standard, but I would like to spend some more time so that I don't have to have this discussion again. So, thank you.
Very good. I think that's it. Do I have a motion? Council reports. So, let me just say, I want to, we've kind of gotten a little slack on our council reports, and I know in the past we used to do verbal council reports. I don't want to go there to re-implement verbal council reports, but I do think that the residents have a right to know what we've done, so I want to encourage all members of the council to turn in council reports going forward. And Elizabeth, I want to thank you for including the attachment to your report. Very
Yes.
helpful.
So I'd like to make an announcement about the January 30th Council of Cities dinner. It's going to be held in Redwood City at Angelica's Restaurant. Supervisor Dave Pine and Horsley and Slocum are sponsoring it, and it's going to be a State of the County address. Supervisor President Carol Broom is going to give some remarks about the state of the county, and then the PowerPoint presentation that I attached to my council report is going to be rolled out by the consultants and under Supervisor Pine's direction. So it's kind of an exciting potential for purchasing bulk energy as a block for the county. They've done it in Marin in a very successful manner, and City Manager probably knows about that a little bit more. Intimately. Good or bad, I don't know.
It's good.
Yeah, but it sounded very good. They unrolled it at CPEG meeting, and so it's I urge everyone to come. And if you haven't received your invitation, we can send you out another one.
And if you want more information on the CCA, there's going to be a presentation in Redwood City on the 28th in the afternoon. The same one that was probably that you
Well, that we're going to get on the 30th.
Is that right?